So the point of today is to talk about electric vehicles. Anybody new looking to get into the industry, we want to tell them the good, the bad, the ugly. Ready? Rolling? Hi guys, thank you for coming to Bangalore, and thanks to my friends who are already in Bangalore. So the point of today is to talk about electric vehicles in the manner that anybody new looking to get into the industry after college, or someone who wants to start a business in EV, a young entrepreneur, we want to tell them the good, the bad, the ugly, which part of the industry may it make sense for them to focus on, and what are the skill sets they might need to inculcate to have a long career, good career in this industry. So maybe we can start with introductions. I'm sure many people know all of you, but let's start with Punit.
So I was born and brought up in Calcutta, and I did my schooling there. I'm born in 84, so I'm 39. Shifted to Bombay in the year 2000. Went to Sydenham College for my graduation.
Where is that?
Sydenham is in Bombay, Churchgate, B Road. Then I finished my graduation in 2005. Then went to London School of Economics for my master's in finance. Did a year of MSc in finance there. Didn't want to come back to India, and so studied one more year. Went to Aston Business School for my second master's. So while I was there studying at Aston Business School,
So you did 2 masters in?
yeah, in the UK, yeah, one in London, one in Birmingham.
Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend?
Okay, I was not focused.
On girls?
Yeah,
What were you focused on?
maybe just trying to find my way out, figuring out to start a business or something.
Have things changed at 39?
How is this not an interview?
I feel like that. Things have changed a little bit. I come from a family business background, so my third generation entrepreneur. So everybody was doing something in the family. So I didn't want to join my family business and was wanting to start on my own. So I was trying to figure out what to do. I did 2 or 3 small startups which didn't go along well. They were in the plastic space, very small startups that didn't go along well. So so I decided that I'll go study outside. Let's probably learn something. And while I was studying at Aston, I chanced upon doing my dissertation. I read about the role of clean energy and renewable energy. That was game changing for me. And I came back to India and I met some solar panel manufacturers who at that time were manufacturing solar panels. Met them in India and realized that there could be a massive opportunity to make solar panels in India and export into Europe. Europe at that time was the biggest market. They were setting up these massive solar power plants in Spain and Italy. They had that feed-in tariff. So I then decided that we'll set up a solar panel manufacturing facility. It was called PLG Power, my first company. PLG, the initials of my grandfather, Purushottam Lal Goyal. He passed away in April 2007 at the age of 78. So I thought, okay, my first company that I'll start should be with his initials. And I started that in 2007-8. Jan of 2008 to manufacture solar panels. The manufacturing facility was at Nashik at Sinnar. So that was the whole idea, to make solar panels. So did that for 4 years between 2008 to 2012. The idea was to go back into solar cell manufacturing, further back into wafer manufacturing, and each was a larger investment. But then the market just crashed in Europe. It was very bad timing. Market just came down, string of bankruptcies in
Market
for solar panels. Nobody anticipated that, and people were ramping up capacities for supplying panels and cells to Europe. And we were also ramping up capacity. The market just kind of crashed in 2 years, between 11 to 13. And I also had not anticipated that. And so it took a big beating. I had to shut down my first startup after achieving that, that kind of manufacturing capacity. Mentally, I was also very...
You ran this with your family?
Just myself. And big lesson learned. I didn't have any co-founder at that time. Just by
Came away
myself.
from it with some liquidity?
So I raised bank funding, raised some private equity from the market, from friends and family initial capital, then went out to raise some equity. We needed large working capital. We had about 150 crores of working capital at that time to buy the materials, stock it, sell it and all that. But anyway, so that the first venture shut down.
Which year was this?
2012, 11-12. And so I took a big beating there, and I realized that manufacturing is tough. It's not everybody's cup of tea to do, and I did not anticipate that this will happen overnight also. But so God shuts one door, opens another. At that time, government of Gujarat came out with a solar policy in Gujarat, and they allowed people to set up solar power plants. We signed a 40 megawatt power purchase agreement with the government of Gujarat, and we set up a 20 megawatt power plant. So we built that project, operated for 2 years, and then sold it to a large Saudi company that was looking to buy an operating asset in India.
For a sum of?
$68 million. And so that was kind of a good project. And that's when I met my co-founder, Anmol Jaggi. Anmol is the founder of Gensol. At that time, Gensol was building many solar power plants. The solar policy was about 300, so they were building nearly half of that capacity, design engineering, EPC, they were doing various stuffs. So I met Anmol, and Anmol's company did the entire EPC. Gensol did that 20 megawatt power plant. They built in record time of about 4 months. So we became friends. And that's how I first met him. I had no idea that we'll start BluSmart probably 8 years later. So that was my second venture. And I took a break of for a year. My wife was studying in the US in Wharton. So a lot of back and forth.
Wait,
India,
you're
US.
married?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you say that when I was badgering you with all those questions?
No, I've been married for 13 years.
You did make us all feel like you're sort of still out of the
Oh,
market.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. No.
I'm looking at you from a different light now.
Okay. Really? Oh, nice.
For a second, I was like, wait, what is going on here?
It was an absolute twist.
Okay.
Okay, then you started BluSmart. What is BluSmart? Tell us.
Yeah. So after my third venture, that was another small 70 odd.
So you walked away with $68 million.
Yeah.
You had
I
a
didn't
lot
walk it away. I mean, I had to give some money back to lenders also.
Okay, you walked away with $50
Some
million.
money. Some money. Let's keep it at some money.
Did you buy something nice?
Some money. And then my third venture was another solar project. Founded PLG Clean Energy Projects. We did a small 70 megawatt solar power plant in Dhule in Maharashtra. Again, Anmol's company, Gensol, played a part there in setting up that power plant also. So 3 solar ventures, and I was
Again,
kind of
sold
done.
it to.
Sorry?
Again, sold that. company.
Yeah, sold that to a large listed entity in India. They're also into renewable space, a very large renewable energy company.
Suzlon?
Suzlon, correct. Yeah, absolutely spot on. So these are 3 ventures, and I was kind of done with solar. And
So you've been making money for a long time.
not really. I lost money in my first venture, tons of money.
Third one?
Third one made money. Yeah,
How much do you sell that for?
for $55 million. So, and then I kind of was thinking what to do, and I met this amazing entrepreneur called Brent Kalanikas. I'd gone to see Hyperloop One in Las Vegas in Nevada, and I met Sherwin Peshawar. He was the CEO of Hyperloop One. And he was showing me this big tunnel where you can travel really fast in that tunnel with pods. They're making these pods, and you can sit in the pod, and they travel really fast at great speeds. And they were going to do it also for logistics. Somehow in the discussion, a lot of solar conversations came out because of my background. And the guy on the other side was Brent Kalanikas. He was. I later learned from him over dinner that he was CFO of Uber. And Sherwin, I learned later that evening. We were sitting in Malibu Club, and we were having dinner in Los Angeles. And he was a Series B investor in.
Now I'm getting a mental picture of you. Sold one company for 50 million, another for 70, sitting in Malibu Club, went to fancy
I was
colleges.
learning from these mavericks what they did in their past life. I like meeting people like I'm meeting you today. I'm meeting Chetan. I'm meeting another amazing EV entrepreneur. So
Okay, and then?
So that evening I learned from them that what the world of mobility could be like. And so Sherwin and Brent spoke a lot about EVs. In fact, when we came out of the conversation from that lunch meeting, that dinner meeting that we had, we saw a charge point charging station, which was right outside the Malibu Club, and it was charging a BMW i8 car. And I've seen EVs before at the Stanford shopping center. I've driven the Tesla on and around Stanford campus in 16, 17. But I was never thinking about EVs so much, or the role EVs could play in the future, like I thought for solar at that time.
So what is the big idea with BluSmart? If you had to define BluSmart in one line.
Yeah. So we are building an energy infrastructure and mobility company, intertwined, interconnected. The whole idea is, which my mentor Brent also said that, look, it's imminent that in the future, all cars will become EVs over the next 10, 20 years. I mean, some countries will do it over 30 years. Faster countries could be maybe 5, 10 years. Mediocre countries could take still about 15, 20 years. The biggest challenge will be the charging infra challenge, and that nobody's talking about.
So are you focused on the charging infra or running a fleet of electric cars?
Both. Actually, it's absolutely interconnected. If I take anything out, the entire model will crumble. And that was the whole idea.
So if your company has a capex of 100 that it has done up until now, how much went towards fleet of electric cars? How much went towards charging infra?
Well, you need more money for charging infra because charging infra is a direct investment in our case, if I can speak so.
And do you charge only your vehicles there or is it open for others?
Well, the whole idea is to build the Pareto of charging model. I'll come there. But initially, we need all the charging for ourselves. We need to help ourselves first. But the bigger idea was to let's create an ecosystem, interconnected, where we will create massive EV charging infra. But that EV charging infra will be of no use if we don't have an anchor tenant. So then we need an anchor tenant, which is in-house anchor tenant, which is BluSmart Fleet, which will then utilize the charging infra, right? And this charging infra, and then that creates a virtuous cycle. So you create charging infra, you bring in the fleet of EVs.
And why
the utilization happens, you build more charging
EVs
infra.
instead of IC right now? What is the big advantage?
Yeah, I mean, EVs have massive advantages, right? So on the business side, the operating costs are super low, right? So the operating cost of running EVs is low. The cost of fuel is cheaper. So look, in 2018, when we were starting up BluSmart, the cost of CNG in India, which was a darling fuel at that time, was about 37, 38, 39 rupees a kg. And that over 5 years went up to about 86, 90 rupees, 95 rupees a kg. Now with government subsidies again come down between 80, 90 rupees a kg, depending on the city you live in. And petrol and diesel at that time was about 72 rupees a litre in 2018 circa. And then that went up to now, I'm from Bombay, it's north of 105, 106 rupees a litre. We always knew that this is a game of energy and this is not a game of mobility. And if you don't build in alphabetical order energy infra mobility company, I mean, it'll not make sense.
So how much does it cost you today to ply 1 kilometer on your EV? What vehicle do you use?
I personally?
No, BluSmart.
BluSmart, we have a fleet of 5,000 plus Tata Tigor cars.
And how much does it cost you to go 1 kilometer in a Tata Decor versus the equivalent model in IC? Maybe something a Ola uses or Uber uses.
Look, the operating cost could range between, and that I could speak for BluSmart and also for an individual, could range between a rupee 20 paise per kilometer to about 2 rupees also, depending what your charging infra is like. Say for example, I give you a rough math.
And on
say I'll give you an example of MG car. So MG today on a full charge gives you 300 plus kilometers. And if you have a green meter installed in your house with BST in Bombay.
What is a green meter?
I mean, it's a special meter that you need to take. Society will provide you a different meter, but they have a special system, a special tariff for EVs. So if you install...
Is that true for me? If I have an electric car and I charge it here, I have to take a green meter? And
you can. I don't know about the Karnataka...
You actually haven't heard of green meters in Karnataka?
In Karnataka.
Yeah.
You can.
But you don't have to.
About Karnataka.
The rate is cheaper, right? So
the
rate for electric mobility may be $5.
Yeah.
And the rate for regular energy could be anywhere from $7-8, depending how much energy you're using.
Listen, but for most individual owners, users, it probably will not justify the effort. Because
but 2 rupees a kilometer is a lot, no?
No.
2 rupees a kilowatt hour.
2 rupees a kilowatt.
Kilowatt hours, yeah.
And how much does that translate into per kilometer? How many kilometers do you get in a kilowatt hour of energy?
You ride 1,000 kilometers in a month. You will spend 1,500 rupees using a regular meter. With a green meter, maybe you'll spend 600-700 rupees, I'm guessing.
He's talking of a scooter.
No, I'm talking about...
Just kilowatt hour.
Car, electric car.
Car will give you around...
Electric car will cost you 1 rupee per kilometer.
You get probably 6 kilometers per kilowatt hour. Probably would be a good number.
The range could be 1
Which
to
1 rupee per
150
kilometer?
paise per
That's what I said.
kilometer, basically, in short.
So how much is it in IC versus EV today?
I mean, today,
On your
CNG
fleet?
today is about 4 rupees, 4.5 rupees. The cost of CNG went up. It was earlier 2 rupees 75 paise. Now, cost of CNG went up. Petrol, diesel today costs you about 8 rupees.
And IC cost you 2 rupees.
No, EV costs.
EV
you.
costs you.
EVs, depending on what your energy mix is, what your capacity is. I mean, for BluSmart, it's a different scale, right? So our cost is very low. Our scale is much larger.
How much would it
Building
be for
massive.
Ola if they're a comparison? Because they have a fleet which is...
I mean, that depends again on the fuel. If they're using CNG, if the driver, I mean, Ola is an app. They're an app. But the driver, if he's using petrol or diesel, and then depends on the car, say Innova car or a small
Wait,
car.
do you own your cars?
In a way, yeah. So we lease all these cars, but we have an obligation to pay for that lease.
Lease
So
from?
leasing from DFIs. So we have secured
What are DFIs?
development financial institutions who fund these cars.
Give me an example.
So IREDA, Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency.
So
Power
they
Finance
buy it and you
Corporation.
lease it from them?
Yeah, so we have an SPV. They buy these cars. I mean, they fund these cars. That SPV takes the loan from these large DFIs.
And what is their contribution in the SPV and what is yours?
So they give the loan to that SPV. And that SPV, that entity will lease cars to BluSmart. We give the deposit, say the margin money for procuring that loan. For example,
Can you break it down for me? How much does this Tata car cost?
say the car cost, say for example, say will be 13 lakhs, just an average.
Okay.
I mean, it could be lower for us at the scale.
Give me
we
for
are.
that car in particular.
Say for example, 12.5, 13 lakhs. So we have to give certain margin. So say 2 lakh rupees per car as a margin that BluSmart will provide.
Okay.
And then the loan is given.
Okay.
And the money is paid to Tata Motors for the cost of the car.
Right. And they charge you a rate of interest on that.
Yes. So so the DFI will charge the rate of interest.
About?
For the loan, sub 10%. It's about
And if
9%.
any young entrepreneur who wants to start a EV car fleet can create this entire model on their own?
Yeah, well, it is tough to do it also. Securing financing for at large scale is tough. I mean, that was the whole idea.
But these people who are lending you, the DFI, which you said, wouldn't they give them as well?
Of course, they will give.
They want to encourage
Yeah,
this.
they want to
right?
absolutely encourage this. Yeah.
What
For
happens to the
utilization.
depreciation on the asset? If I'm a DFI and I'm lending you at 10%,
Yeah.
in 5
So
years,
that is where
car
the SPV comes in. That is where the entity comes in. So this could be exciting with depreciation. So if the entity involved could be a renewable energy company or in those businesses with also profits, you can also enjoy depreciation benefits, 40% depreciation benefits of owning and leasing that asset.
Right.
So debt benefits come in with the asset owner, whosoever
And
the
the-
owner of the asset.
At the end of the cycle, these cars are valueless in a manner, right?
Valueless, I wouldn't say they're valueless. I mean, in fact, the best part about EVs is that it has life 1 and life 2. So there's life 1. Where
But the cost of the battery, let's assume, is 60% of the cost of the vehicle.
Not really. I mean, I wouldn't say 60%.
It's really more than 35.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not 60. Could be say between for a car 35-40%, and when you exhaust life 1, you can obviously replace and infuse, buy a battery, work with the OEM or another startup to say install new battery. That's when the beauty of EVs come in, life 2, because then you've already paid for the car.
Yeah, the point
the body is built to last for 8 to 10 years. The body is built to last for 8 to 10 years. The battery needs to be changed after 4 years.
So wait, if the body is built for 10 years,
Yeah.
even if you change, how long is the battery built for?
it depends on utilization. So for an individual
On average?
whose utilization is only
On
60 to
average
100 kilometers.
for BluSmart.
See, for BluSmart. No, for
I'm
BluSmart,
focusing on somebody who can start, somebody young, an entrepreneur who can start a business such as yours. So he can go to a DFI, borrow money, lease a vehicle, run it at scale at 2 rupees a kilometer, but maybe when he begins at a higher value. Now, what is the battery life beyond which he has to change the vehicle? And what happens to the vehicle at the end of 5 years or 10 years?
Yeah, good. So now for BluSmart, our utilization is about nearly 200 kilometers a day. So which means in layman language, about 6,000 kilometers a month, 70,000 plus kilometers a year. Depends what kind of warranties or guarantees you have negotiated with the leasing institution or with the manufacturer. Some will give you, say, 160,000 kilometers, some will 200, some maybe 250,000 kilometers. So it depends how much can you exhaust. We can utilize between 200 to 250,000 kilometers in 4 years, right? So which means the battery is done.
So you do 2 cycles, 4 years each, 8 years, the body of the car is gone. Then you have to ditch
That
the
again
car.
depends how you use your car.
I am young. I want to start a business like BluSmart. I'm trying to figure out which DFI do I go to, how to borrow money, how to create a SPV, how to lease cars, what efficiencies do I build in to run a business of aggregating electric car like a Uber or a Ola would do.
Yeah, I mean, you could start small also. You may not need to go to DFI. You can go to probably smaller institutions who are funding cars. They are, probably platforms which are also leasing 100, 200,
Is there a
400
cap
cars.
like a DFI will only do above a certain number?
I mean, it's easier for them because the fact that they are DFI, they want to give larger loans or larger amounts. It's easier for them to process. But there are small institutions also who are funding 100, 200, 300, 400 cars. And I know few fleet aggregators who are also now buying EVs and deploying on the platforms of Uber or trying to start mini fleets for B2B purposes in cities, maybe one in Bangalore, could be in West Bengal, somewhere in Bombay also. So we have a very different mindset, Nikhil. So we believe that asset financing is key for us. I mean, both Anmol and myself, we have raised tons of financing for renewable energy projects. So we went back to the same institutions who funded us in the past. And we said that you've been supporting our renewable energy story. And now it's time for you to support our EV story. So
is that an opportunity to setting up solar power plants today?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Anmol continues to also run and operate Gensol, which is today actually grown to a massive company. It builds gigawatts of solar projects today. And the solar story has just begun. Massive opportunity for...
What is the yield on investment if somebody were to ask? Because I'm thinking running a solar power plant is largely commoditized by area and the amount of power you can generate. If somebody were to set up a 1 megawatt plant, how much will it cost and what kind of return would you make?
Depends on your offtake. I mean, a megawatt plant investment could be in the range of 3 to 3.25 crores.
And that number has come down from 10, 12, whatever.
It used to be 18 crores a megawatt back in 2012 and came down when I was setting up my project in Gujarat was 15, 16 crores a megawatt, 15.5. Came down further to about 12 crores to $1 million a megawatt back in 2017 time, 16 time. Further has come down half.
And how much do you yield on that?
I mean, it depends what the offtake was. So that doesn't change.
Explain offtake, please.
At the price at which you're selling the power. So today you need to also figure out, because you have invested a certain amount, you have to work out the cost at which it'll become profitable for you. So you need to work out at the cost that you want to sell.
Who determines what rate you sell power at?
Discom does, the off-taking entity does,
what is the off-taking
regulator
entity?
does. So they are, so there are two ways, right? So you can sell power to state. Like for example, in my case, I sold power to Gujarat Urja Vikas Nigam Limited. We entered into a fixed price contract for 25 years. For the first 12 years, the price was X, which is 15 rupees per unit kilowatt hour. And then for the balance 13 years, it was 5 rupees per unit kilowatt hour, right? So it was a fixed price contract. You could also probably do open-ended today if you negotiate with a industrial house who needs power and for power savings.
Can you do that? Can you sell not to a Discom or the government, but sell individually?
You can also do it to individual, yeah, for individual complexes.
But do you have to be near the company that you're selling to? Otherwise, how do you transport it?
No. I mean, it could be near if you have empty land.
Let's say I buy, how much land do you need for 1 megawatt?
4 acres a megawatt.
So how much can I sell that power for?
In India, the lowest bidding that happened at gigawatt level when Solar Energy Corporation of India, SECI or NTPC do large bids for calling for a 500 megawatt solar investment or gigawatt investment. Those bids have been hovering around 2 rupees 75 paise.
Okay, so typically on average, what is the yield of that 4 acre land and 3 crores invested?
I mean, what is the money that you're going to make on the investment? I think about post-tax anywhere between 18 to 19%.
Even today?
Even today, yeah.
Right. And how big has BluSmart gotten to today? On the 5,000 fleet, what is the top line, bottom line?
So we are nearly 440 crores around ARR. We're doing a revenue of close to 1.3 to 1.4 crores per day revenue. Good days, a little higher.
Charging and the car put
The
together?
ride hailing revenue is about nearly 450 crores per ARR. The charging revenue is about 100 crores ARR today, but that's in-house. So we have BluSmart Mobility, which is a holdco, and then we have BluSmart Charge, BluSmart Fleet, and BluSmart Tech. Which are 3 independent subsidiaries, but all reporting to the holdco. BluSmart Charge invests in the real estate, or probably leases the land, builds all the charging infra, operates all the charging infra. The BluSmart fleet, SPV, leases electric cars, pays for the drivers, and runs all the paraphernalia on the ride-hailing business. BluSmart Tech, which owns the IP, the BluSmart app for consumers. And they all work together in tandem, where the charging company charges for the charging services which are used by the ride-hailing fleet. The fleet company's job is to bring in amounts of fleet. So we have secured financing for 20,000 cars as of now, right? Trying to secure financing for 40,000 cars. So,
And are you able to, at this scale, do it profitably?
yeah, so the charging infra is today profitable because we had the in-house anchor tenant, so that was profitable. Ride-hailing is a network effect game, so we have to really go deep and wide.
You really have to scale before you break even. What is the rate of growth right now?
I mean, it's not massive because it takes a lot of time to build up charging infra.
What is it?
So we can probably add 1,000, 2,000 cars a month.
Right.
But we are not able to do that. We are only able to add 400 cars to 500 cars a month. So car financing is secured and adding cars is easy peasy, right? So you write a check, you get a car, the cars are ready, the manufacturer, OEMs in India can supply you cars. But again, I go back to my initial opening statement and say that this is not easy for somebody to do because adding cars is not what we want to do without availability of charging infra.
The point of this entire thing is we want more young people to start working in the EV industry in one place or another. So we want to throw all the information they might require to make up their mind on whether to start a business here or get a job here. Yeah? Who'd like to go next? Suruchi, would you?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is how I thought I'd describe myself. So I am a glorified brewer of green hydrogen. And let's not even give a color to it. I'd say I'm a brewer of hydrogen. So why I say brewer is that, when you're trying to break down technology so that you can pitch it to people for funding or you're talking to people to sort of introduce them to a new molecule, you try to dumb the science down, but that's not what I want to do. My skills that I've developed over the last sort of 20 years of, engineering in PhD is to be able to manipulate microorganisms, not at the genetic level, but to come together as a group and do what I asked them to do. And I'm really grateful to them for what they do for me. Typically, when we talk about microorganisms, we talk about things like brewing and idli, dosa, and food. That's something that's tangible. We touch that. But my microorganisms produce electricity. So anytime we have the conversation about solar or wind, I always tell myself we should have a conversation about microorganisms that generate electricity as well. So that's the sort of play.
Yeah.
Still talks about what I do, but
give us more.
right.
Start from the beginning.
I'm a child of energy. My dad is a geologist. He started as a graduate trainee in ONGC, and he was with them for 40 years. And so all I've known all my life is what is Brent price for the day? Did we strike oil at a particular site? And the fact that my dad is, really sorry, Dad, very active climate denier. To him, everything is in cycles of centuries, not a single century, but multiple centuries. So he says, Arey, we weren't alive and it must have been so hot so many centuries ago. We don't really know what happens, and geology only gives us a clue. The way he puts it is that geology is nothing but alcohol and good guesswork. So to him, us guzzling petrol and his very big contribution in getting all of this oil out was not the reason why we were in this situation. But I've sort of had a contrarian opinion for exactly that reason. So I've done nothing but energy.
Would you like to, just for context, would you like to explain climate change in a brief minute?
Absolutely.
Because everybody has a different opinion. Like, for a long time, I assumed every surface has an albedo effect. Sun's rays hit Earth. Different surfaces reflect different kind of heat back. The atmosphere blocks different kind of rays differently by virtue of what gases are present there. But the more people I talk to, sometimes somebody is telling me carbon is no longer a problem, methane is a problem, water vapor is a problem. So I want to learn what exactly is climate change today.
So what does greenhouse What's a greenhouse, right? You're trying to create an environment for plants where there's a constant recirculation of CO2 because that's what plants need, which means you're creating a dome where everything is more humid, everything is more moist and more wet. We aren't meant to live in an environment which is supposed to be so highly heated. I'll give you a great example, and this is something that I find very troubling now. Has anybody noticed that turbulence has gotten far worse now than, say, a decade back? Did you know that's an effect of climate change? Air is thinner up there than it used to be. So aircraft would hit a particular height above which there was no turbulence. And now, as the air literally heats up, even at higher sort of altitudes, you feel the effect of turbulence.
I mean, a simple way to look at it is if you think of Mercury and Venus, what do you think is hotter?
Mercury?
No, Venus, right? And it's because of the atmosphere, right? So just because you're closer to a heat source doesn't mean it's hotter. The atmosphere plays a much larger role on that front.
So climate change is the wrong kind of gases in our atmosphere.
That's correct.
Making it harder for heat to escape.
So what's happening is by the temperature going up, right, you're now melting the polar ice caps. You're therefore, at the result of that, changing how currents would go. So an El Nino may come in here. Your monsoons may shift as a result of it because you're putting a lot more, changes in ocean currents, which then affect temperature patterns around. A rise in that would mean Maldives may be under water as a result of that. So it's all starting from the fact that it's methane, it's carbon dioxide as the main ingredients. There are others too.
All of what we are talking about is in a way to curtail climate change. Can each of you define climate change in 1 minute? In your own way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What I understand of climate change is obviously, to even Chetan's point, is, heating is obviously causing a lot of challenges. If you see the temperature which has, gone up in the last 10 years, is really bad for us. I was reading somewhere.
I think the question is, why is the heating happening?
Yeah, it's happening because of emissions, right? So every year, world produces 52 billion tons of, CO2 emissions. Industries, more industrialization, more cars on the road, more manufacturing, more power plants.
And because of that emission, what is happening?
Two important contributors are, I could say, and BluSmart plays a role there to probably curb pollution. Transportation and electricity generation. These two sectors, electricity accounts for 25% to 26% of the world's CO2 emissions, and logistics, delivery, mobility, all put together, transportation as a whole, not just cars, contribute, and you can say airlines also are part of it because airlines also contribute. Again, another 27%. So 52%, this is Bill Gates' book, which he wrote, that 50% of the global CO2 emission that happened is because of transportation on ground.
So if you look at the correlation between the temperature and look at the correlation between the concentration of CO2, they have a direct correlation, right? So that's very critical because the curve is like that right now, right? And all we can do today is, it's going to continue. What do we do to reduce that kind of, the slope of that? So if you reduce the slope, we may hit this point 100 years later. If we don't, we may be 20 years from today. So all we can do is probably reduce that slope. If we do it today, that impact is much bigger. We start to do it 10 years from today, then that, you need to have a much more drastic change as we think of it.
Fair. Tarun, climate change?
Chetan's almost a professor. He's pretty much finished between him and Punit. And I'm probably not the right guy to describe anything more because we didn't actually start Ather because of climate. And we're not selling you electric vehicles primarily because it'll save the climate. So our view is more energy than climate.
Explain why you're selling electric vehicles.
So what we believed always is that a lot of this problem fundamentally boils down to using something that's a finite source.
The electricity you're using today to run Ather is generated from finite sources.
75% is finite, but 25% is not. Right?
Has India moved to 25% renewable?
Actually, capacity I think is almost 30.
Much lower.
No.
5%.
I think either 25 or 27 something.
So earlier, that numbers, so today, non-coal, I would say. So thermal.
Non-thermal actually.
Yeah, non-thermal. So earlier that number was 95%. So renewable percent was less than 1%. Today, total installed capacity is about 175 gigawatts in India.
How much is
170.
percentage?
I would
Total is
say about
400.
27%
Yes.
is renewable capacity, because the capacity utilization factor. Installed capacity of thermal is 260 gigawatts, but the CUF, the capacity utilization of PLF, plant load factor, is about 70%. In solar or wind, now again wind is slightly higher on the PLF side, but the installed capacity is 175, but the capacity utilization factor, the plant load factor, hovers between 20 to 25% in solar. Now depending on new solar power plants could have higher PLF. Wind is above 40. Actual utilization of that 175 gigawatt could be in the range of about 50 gigawatt north, which is the power actually coming out, or 60 gigawatt actually coming out of the installed capacity, depending.
About 4 to 5% was
So
the
then you would
number
say in layman language that it could be 1/4 of the capacity of today.
So in summary, that would mean right now electricity generation 5% renewable, 95%.
No.
I didn't
More
say
like
that.
25,
25%,
75.
no? So layman language, 1/4,
Installed
right? So
capacity basis, it's
of the extraction,
25%.
of the extraction also. So I said 175 gigawatt is installed.
Okay.
You are getting, in terms of plant load factor, capacity utilization factor, you are getting 50 gigawatt. There, with 260 odd gigawatts, as per Ministry of MNRE, I keep checking data, is 270 odd gigawatts, but your PLF is about 70%.
What is PLF?
Plant load factor, capacity utilization.
So for
you
the
install a plant,
just
your
because we're
utilization-
speaking to like all like, stupid people like me who don't know much about this industry, no abbreviations, like no like simple words.
Correct.
So 50 gigawatt is how much? So sorry to interrupt. 50 gigawatt is how much of this country's
25%.
It's
That's what we're saying.
25%, is it?
Renewable is about 1/4 of current.
Today, which is an
current
amazing
requirement.
feat in the last 20 years.
I think it's
In the
renewable is
research
going
that I
up
did, there are
5 times.
variable numbers. 5% seems to be a number from some places.
No.
25
No,
I've
it's
not
25%.
Yeah, it's
5% we
yeah.
crossed a long time ago.
seen. Chetan?
I think we're using around 15%, 10 to 15%, not more. That's what I, and again, the numbers vary. Karnataka is pretty high. We're probably close to 45 to 45% in Karnataka because we have a lot of hydro and stuff, but that's not true for every state.
India's energy mix today is about 25% is renewables. That's
Yeah.
the published data.
Me too.
And
It's okay, we're all different places.
I'm just trying to tell you
5%, 10 to
from the
15%,
forum.
25%. What is the loss of power in transmission in India?
10%.
Is
10
that
to
all?
12%. The rest is theft.
Yeah.
The 25% number that you hear is theft. Only half
That
of
also
that is
depends on
actually
states.
transmission
The
losses.
states.
I'm
Yeah, states.
I'm
So,
saying pan-India.
so what we're talking about is power is generated in point X, utilized in point Y. Who does this generally? Like, is it power grid? How many companies are there which are doing transmission? Is there a different number where different kind of losses are happening at different transmission people?
So the north, south, east, west, India now has a one grid, one nation policy that came into effect in the Ministry of Power in 2003 came with the Electricity Act, where they said that all these different transmission distribution companies which are now there should be one grid, one nation policy. Power Grid came in and said that somebody's producing power in north, east, west, south. It's one central grid of India. Everybody reports. You can go on this website called vidyutprava.in, where you can see on real-time basis where the power is being generated, what is the source of that energy. So in fact, that's the right website to go and check out what's India's energy mix. It's called vidyutprava.in by Ministry of Power.
On average in the
Others-
country, would you say 10 to 25%?
Yes, 10 to 12%.
Okay.
And that's come down post this one grid, one nation policy. With earlier, nobody was answerable
Okay,
to anyone.
then the question to Tarun. If, let's assume midway between all of you guys, let's say 15 to 20% of power is renewable. If you're going to lose 10 to 20% of that in emission, let's say we are left with 15, 16% in India is renewable, 85% is fossil based. Does it still make sense to pay the premium to buy an electric vehicle because you're net in today's state putting the same amount of emissions out there?
Even if it was 100% coal-based, it will still make sense.
Because
So the thing
Yeah,
is,
you'd be around 30% better. In India's current grid, 30 to 35% from
Because?
an ICE engine vehicle. So an internal combustion engine vehicle is a deficiency of around 25%. An electric machine is around 90%, probably in drive cycles around 85. So you're talking of around 3 times efficient
per unit of energy.
per unit of energy. So now if I take the fuel and burn it, then I'm using 3 times more energy at a unit.
no, Chetan, the comparison of this is with the power plant, right?
Yeah.
So the gap there is the power plant is far more efficient.
The power plants are far more efficient
Yes.
than an ICE engine vehicle.
Scooter and cars ke engines, they would be actually lucky to hit 25%. That's at the good efficiency factor. They are usually hovering in the 20 wala number. But the power plants operate at like 35%, like pretty good efficiency factors. So वहाँ पे आपका सारा maths workout होता है. उसके बाद you can, sure, the 10% efficiency will become 32. That's still way better.
So you're
But
saying
also you-
even if the power is generated in one way or
Still
another,
better off running electric.
at the
As
end
far as emissions
point,
go.
electric vehicles are a lot more efficient at using that energy.
Well, yeah, and there's also multiple things, right? I think there is an issue around climate change, but there's also an issue on local emissions, right? And today in cities, if you think of NOx and what's happening in Delhi, even with CNG and stuff, you have zero emissions at the local level. It's also easier to control emissions at single point, right, at a power plant. It's hard to control that over a million vehicles, right? And that deteriorates. So now let's look at today and 10 years from today. The ICE vehicle that's giving you X today will probably be emitting 2X 10 years from today, right? The electric vehicle today, which is 30% less, right, will probably be 70% less in the future because in the next 10 years, the grid will become cleaner. So in a way, then you start to look at the differential, it becomes far bigger, no?
I get
Right. So that's an important thing too.
Zero
Because
emissions.
once you
So
bought
EVs
the
are zero
electric,
emissions, right?
Yeah,
so
so
they
it's
don't
only
emit
getting
any
better.
emissions.
For me, the only concern is that imagine a scenario, and it's a best case scenario for the both of you specifically, maybe specifically for you. Imagine if all vehicles suddenly boom overnight, become EVs. Aren't you just taking
have
the
enough
problem?
electricity. We have
No,
enough energy.
It's not about how much electricity you have. I'm glad you think we have
We are
enough.
not.
but
I just said like it is in scooters at least. Our math was it is.
we don't
it
have
is
enough, you're
40%. It is 40% less emission than a petrol scooter.
So what all that I'm
You're
saying
at
is
least
that
reducing emission by 40%.
Are you
even if the
simply-
grid does not become greener at all? Like forget become green at all. Even if the grid becomes worse, 100% coal.
Yeah, if it
even in
remains-
that case, you would still be at least, as you said, 30% more efficient, less
what is
emissions.
50% when it comes to
No, and that's a super bad scenario. It's like the world is going back. We
you
start
just
refusing
crossed
solar.
1.5 degrees this
No,
year.
no, no, no. I'm
Still
saying it is the world is
consistently
going back
long.
on generation. The world
Yeah,
is
I
going
heard,
forward.
I heard the Senate hearing of Elon Musk in the US, where the senator who was questioning him said if everybody were to buy a Tesla today, you would need 20x the energy, 20x the electricity America is producing today. So are you saying the way to do this is transition slowly?
The senator math seems wrong.
Right. Yeah. so-
4x or 20x? I can't
No, let's look
remember
at
the number.
India, right? India has around a park size of around 250 million vehicles, scooters, cars, buses, trucks, everything put together. Let's
I
look
think
at
it's a bit more, 300.
300, close to 300 now, right? So let's look fast forward to 2030, say 450 million. Let's say if we have some connected vehicles and more, maybe we have 400 or 350 to 400. Now, if everything was electric, the park size, right, which is highly unlikely, you'd need around 300 gigawatts of renewable energy. India is targeting 575 by 2030,
Yes.
right? So now to put that in context, that's 0.5%, less than 0.5% of the land size of Rajasthan, okay, with solar panels. We're estimating, two-wheelers maybe 50 to 70% by 2030, cars maybe 30%, three-wheelers maybe 100% by 2030, buses and stuff maybe. That's only new vehicles. But that new vehicles is, say, 25 million a year, and then you're saying maybe 50% of that is electric, right? It's 10 million. But then if the park is already 300, you're adding 10 million more, right? So in the next 5 years, you're adding 50 million, right? So 50 million of that is still 25% or less than that, 20% of the park size, right? I've given you the example of everything going electric. But if you then just look at that piece of it, you may need significantly less amount of energy, right? Last year, India added probably the amount of energy for air conditioners that we've just added in India could power over 5 million vehicles. So to put that in perspective, we forget that what our LED TVs are doing and what air conditioning is doing, right? And the amount of energy we're using for that compared to, guys, we put 1 million vehicles on our roads, but a lot of them was two-wheelers, right? This is with cars and everything.
And all of these are essentially burning coal, if not in your vehicles. But they're
the
burning coal
numbers come down
somewhere.
from 100 to 70.
So the thing is,
It's gonna
you're
go down
talking
from
about
there.
once you buy the electric vehicle, right? Today it's 30% better Next year, the energy grid gets better. It's 35. Following year is 40. Then it's 50. Then
What
it's 60.
happens to the increase in temperature though? So you're saying the trade-off is still
No, you're saying
in
that
favor. So
all you're saying is
we're trying to still control the 1.5 degrees somewhere here, right? Or we
No,
not
I think
doing
that I think the point they're trying to make is if the renewable mix in energy generation is going up at the pace that it is, electric vehicles will make more sense even in the future. Right?
Yes, and also what you have to see is that
But until
certain
then, we
policy
burn coal.
change. Sorry.
But that's changing.
But until then, we.
No, I'm saying something. I'm saying,
No, I wouldn't
what are
say.
the
Let's
options?
put
What are the
it.
options?
I mean, let's look at it. Today, policies are changing, right?
Right.
It was right now at 100 kilowatts. You can now get a connection,
Open access.
which was earlier a megawatt. In some cities, some states is 500 kilowatts, right? We're talking to them to cumulate demand, which is not happening. But if the
Right.
government now talks of cumulating demand on energy infrastructure, I could ask Nikhil, hey guys, here's a 10-year purchase agreement, right? Put up a solar plant outside Bangalore. I don't need it here, right? I'll buy energy for you 10 years. You can make your 15% return, 17% return on your money, and I will get energy 20% cheaper than the grid. And it'll be green. My customers' environment is good, and everyone makes business. You could not say this 5-7 years ago.
Right.
Today, you can say that I can actually make business sense to put renewable energy in place. Some policy frameworks have to be cleaned up. If that policy framework is cleaned up, in Delhi, we need 10 megawatts. I get it overnight. You need probably 50 megawatts or 40 megawatts. We'd get it overnight, which means all of us in the business will do that. If he has an Ather network on his charging infrastructure and he can accumulate the demand, he says, I'm going to buy this much from you because I'm using this demand. So in the next couple of years, what has to happen is energy and mobility have come together. And these departments have been separate, right? And once they come together and they look at the bigger picture of 80 billion of imports, 100 billion of imports of oil, I mean, what we've talked is one is climate, the second is really the energy equation for the country. What's driving policy is energy equation and climate. But energy equation is much bigger. If what we've talked about by 2030, that all surface transportation could be electric, that's $100 billion to $150 billion of less import, right? What does that do to the economy?
That's insane.
So I think
Makes
we have to look
sense.
at it from both
That number
sides.
doubled. It was
Yeah.
$60 billion in 2018 when we were writing the white paper for BluSmart. Now that number is $120 billion. In fact, Nirmala Sitharaman in the last budget said that first time it was $100 billion last year.
Yeah.
It's projected this is 120. So in 5 years, 2x.
Suruchi, why don't you finish your introduction?
Sure.
Can we start this conversation off with what is green hydrogen and the fuel source? Everybody
Green
will understand.
hydrogen is creating hydrogen from a renewable source.
Renewable source.
Right? Gray hydrogen would be I take methane and I split it. So I'm still putting emissions out and I get hydrogen or ammonia, other depending how you think about the structure. So green is from renewable. I take wind energy, I take solar, I take any renewable energy and create green electrons. So that's green hydrogen.
And Suruchi, you take industrial waste and make hydrogen.
Absolutely. So for us, the problem here is exactly what.
Come
what you
from
pointed
the
out.
back of your story so people have context as to how you started making hydrogen.
Sure. So going back to the original story, I've always been in and around energy. Definitely thought bioenergy is critically important, maybe because I have a degree in the field.
Talk about your education.
Right. This table is so intimidating right now. I come from very humble engineering background. I'm glad I have an education. It is insane to me that I have a PhD degree, but I think that it's just something that happened.
What is your PhD in?
It's a degree known as bioprocess technology. I got my PhD from Institute of Chemical Technology, which used to be known as UDCT, University Department of Chemical Technology. It's a pre-independence institute that was created for the textile industry in Bombay. Still sits out of Matunga. Unfortunately, because of the textile industry collapse in the 60s and the 70s, they had to look for other things to do, but they stuck to only one thing,
To a
which was chemical
stupid
engineering.
person like me, how would you explain what your PhD is in? One line.
Very simple. I just engineered a few microorganisms to break down agricultural waste, basically crop residue, which continues to remain a problem 5 years after I finished my PhD, and converted to ethanol. So ethanol as a fuel additive. It was at the center of energy biosciences, and the key skills I developed was, once again, how do you create a community of microorganisms to do what you want them to do. But the problem we were solving was, how do you prevent crop burning? Instead of coming up with ways of disposing of the crop in more meaningful ways, suppose you could convert it to something more useful, which in our case we thought was ethanol. The government was making a heavy push for something known as second generation cellulosic ethanol, which is basically to use non-food sources as a feedstock for making ethanol as a fuel additive.
How did you go from your PhD in this to starting to create hydrogen and Ossus, your company?
Oh my God. I had finished my PhD and I was working for my professor, my advisor's engineering company. It was an engineering procurement and construction company. That's what chemical engineers do. Technologies out of our lab needed to be pitched to, and we were heavily working with the PSUs. So you need to go out and talk about what value the technology can bring, and that was me in the business development role. In between all of this, I had my professor's friend who was very wealthy, but not formally educated. He has a sort of sugar mill, which runs one half of the year producing ethanol and the other half making sugar. And one day his plant was shut down. And he didn't quite understand because for some bizarre reason, the notification was in English, not in Marathi, as you would expect, coming from Maharashtra. And he came to my professor and he said, what is going on? And he said, you've been illegally dumping your wastewater, effluent as it's called. And he said, I have no idea. I give a dude money to sort of take it away from my site. This man who's been collecting money from my professor's sort of friend has been going around the block and dumping it right there because, hey, somebody paid me to take care of it. I took care of it. That's when my professor gave me a sort of brief to say, what do you think are the pathways, as it's called in sort of biochemistry or biology, that we can use to treat this sugar industry wastewater? That's when I happened to find this very neat biology, which was not typical. These were microorganisms which are minor in community. They occur in our gut, our brain and soil, and they produce electrons or electricity. And they're constantly stressed. And I really related to them for that reason. These microorganisms, yes, it's a stressful, I would not recommend a PhD to anyone. I would, in fact, say don't get an education.
I'll give you some context, okay? So in Suruchi's company, we're an investor. And every time I've been on a Zoom call with her and heard something, it takes me a lot of time to go back and research and figure out what she said in the first place.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
But
I
continue.
apologize for that. So basically what happened was I needed funding to test this out. And I said, hey, professor, give me some money. And he said, no, sorry. I think you should stick to this. You give good presentations. And honestly, I thought I'd be a career academic. This was a break before I'd start off my postdoc in the US. And I'm someone who's used to working with what's known as a mass spectrometer. It's this big device that breaks down proteins and tells you what's there. And I was really keen on that. And then I said, wait, what if I get funding to test out this technology? And fortunately for me, Shell had a program known as the Shell E4 program. I have zero idea about entrepreneurship at this point. I'm pretty sure I misspelled it all the time as well. And once I joined the program, they gave me some money to test it out. The only credit I'd give myself was that I had a very specific problem I had identified for them. Fracking back in 2017-18 was producing more water than oil. And here I had the opportunity to produce green hydrogen using these microorganisms and simultaneously recycle water. It was a win-win. But this was not a technology meant for India. I was ready to go off to the US as I had planned. And when did COVID happen? About 4 days before lockdown in Bangalore, I had my tickets booked in and I had to sort of shut shop and say, can't do anything. But one thing led to another. We got Tata Steel as a customer. And that's not been much of a turnaround after that. Good thing we did was select green hydrogen as a molecule. There was no policy. I'm pretty certain people, when we had demo day pitches, people would ask us, what do you use the hydrogen for? So it's been a long journey to this point.
I still want you to explain in a very layman way what exactly you do.
We're producing electrons, which is used for hydrogen gas. The water is intact and is recycled for reuse on site.
Okay, so there's dirty water, comes to you.
Yes.
You create electrons.
Yes.
Where is hydrogen coming from?
Think of it as this vessel, right? There's wastewater in it, not demineralized or desalinated water. Ganda pani is sitting in that. You have a couple of electrodes placed inside. on one electrode, you have microorganisms. So they're trapped onto the electrode surface and they're doing their business of producing electrons. There's a difference in potential between the two electrodes. That's why the electrons which are produced by the microorganisms are carried from the anode to the cathode, which is the opposing electrode. 2 electrons, 2 protons, which are coming from water, combine to make hydrogen gas. So hydrogen gas is the product that you get out of the reactor. Electron is an intermediate, but the source of the electron is biological in nature and not electrochemical. So it's not coming from solar, it's not coming from wind. And the added advantage is that here's some clean water for you to reuse. We request you to please reuse it. It's free of cost.
What is Ossus doing now? How much have you scaled to? Who is this feasible for today to use Ossus?
So anybody who has wastewater at their site and also requires green hydrogen is obviously our beachhead market, because then you're doing away with the distance problem, which is honestly what people talk about when it comes to green hydrogen. You would much rather produce green hydrogen as a storage molecule during renewable energy production, which is a whole other can of worms I'm about to open now. So anytime there's surge, so you have all of this power that you can't put on the grid, whether it's wind or solar. You can use pumped hydro, and there's other sort of strategies for storing that excess power. Otherwise, you're having to scale back or worse, completely stop production. If you use that excess energy to split water, voila, you have hydrogen gas that has industrial use, etc., but it's basically used to store energy that you couldn't otherwise put onto the grid. The problem with all of this that no one will talk to you about is that for producing 1 kilogram of hydrogen by splitting water, you would need, depending on who you speak to, 9 kilograms of water, which is 9 liters, going all the way up to 30 liters of water if it requires treatment. Treatment is basically making it desalinated water. In a country where 500 million people don't have access to drinking water, India's target of 5 billion tons of indigenous green hydrogen production would require approximately 50 million tons of water. We
Nikhil,
don't have
with
that.
on this table, nobody supports hydrogen then.
Except if you use Ossus technology, in which case you get water back again. So this is a Nazi era
Her company is
technology.
like growing really fast.
Then I'm saying.
So who are they're using it?
So what does it cost for a kg of hydrogen?
I can give you the good number, I can give you the bad number. So everybody wants to hit, it's officially known as SHOT, short. So it's hydrogen priced at under $1. It's an Indo-US joint program. So it's about 0.8
That's really good
USD.
today.
1
you're
kilogram
saying.
of hydrogen.
1 kilogram of hydrogen.
Sorry,
Hanji.
and that generates how much?
33
electricity?
kilowatt
33
hour.
kilowatt
It's the
hours,
highest in energy density
33.
compared to
So
anything.
we got 2 rupees per kilowatt.
No, that is-
Converting
This
it
is
to-
really cheap. I mean, I'm just.
Oh, no,
I'm
conversion
saying-
is only 30% efficient.
I thought
This is massively horrible efficiency for
Yeah, so
converting
actually
it back
6 times.
into
So
electricity.
just use it as heat energy.
So 6-7 rupees.
But why would you convert it back into electricity? You would just use the hydrogen.
Because
right?
ultimately
Yes,
you only have
that's
electric.
Something
exactly
what
why
saying.
mobility
but you're talking
talks
for
of-
$1. I mean that
for certain PSUs in refining, it's 40 rupees per kilogram. It's a very interesting chemistry. So you basically have, before electrons are generated, you need to break all the organic content down to what are known as short-chain fatty acids. Those of us interested in gut health, I've heard a lot about short-chain fatty acids because it talks about how well your stomach is doing at digesting. But it's the very same short-chain fatty acids that you need as precursor. Refineries produce a lot of acids and alcohols in their wastewater, which means you're starting with exactly what you need, so that's the cheapest. Having said that, if you add compression, because you need to use the hydrogen, thank you so much, it basically bumps all the way up to 112 rupees per kilogram. Compared to market price, of course, it's 1/4. If you bought from certain large multinational corporations using long off-take agreements, it would cost you about $400 per kilogram. So this is still cheaper than...
Oh, that's damn expensive.
What is Ossus use case?
For us, it's completely different from the whole mobility angle.
Tell us your angle.
It's industrial use, right? For us, we're not even talking about steel, for example. Steel is very specific. We got lucky. We had a team that worked with us that was great, so we could accelerate very quickly. We're looking to produce about 21 tons of green hydrogen per day at a certain site. However, going beyond that, the capacity for consumption currently doesn't exist. Even government policy asks us to wait until 2030. Then they'll have the export system set up, and then they'll force certain industry like chemicals, ethylene, cement, and steel to sort of decarbonize using hydrogen as a molecule. But we can't really afford to wait, right?
So who are you selling to today?
So those who use it as a raw material. Chemical industry uses hydrogen quite frequently in processes such as hydrogenation. So it's not energy, it's not heat. It's basically a building block molecule to upgrade certain chemicals.
That's
so
what Reliance does, right? That's why they're interested in hydrogen. They just need a lot of hydrogen.
They need a lot of hydrogen because they refine. So refineries are
That's
obviously...
yeah.
But the government would
It's
have...
not always energy. Sometimes it's a good raw material.
Absolutely.
So how much are you selling now in terms of sales as a company?
It's not much. It's our largest plant. It's with another starch sorbitol manufacturer in Ahmedabad. Our maximum capacity currently is 250 kilograms per day, and we use only 18 cubic meters or 18,000 liters of this particular effluent to do it. That's our largest sort of plant so far. We have an offtake agreement that we're really scared of for about 1 ton per day for another certain client in the steel industry. But the idea is that the active working operation is 250 kilograms. It's a drop in the ocean. For you to hit 5 million tons per year, you need about 10,000 tons per day. Fortunately for us, we know that we need only about 35 sites where there is enough density of organic matter in the wastewater. But once again, we can't really wait until 2030. So a few months down the line, we will have to start dumping the hydrogen on the open market. It's basically spot trading, exactly the way LNG is traded. And you use the same sort of LNG route. Go from Australia, Japan, South Korea, and onwards, because there's a detailed pipeline for hydrogen that exists. But that's grey hydrogen. The idea here is to sort of bust the market by selling it at such low values.
So Suruchi, if I were to ask you the question, not for two-wheelers or cars, but for trucks or buses, is green hydrogen tomorrow going to be a viable source of energy compared to EVs, electric, all of that?
We are not sources of energy. We are the consumers. So if they could generate hydrogen, generate electricity out of it, we'll use it.
So that we don't see as a genuine option.
Very inefficient, we won't. But
Converting it back into electrons is not really...
I'm talking about a bus which runs on hydrogen.
Yes, so fuel cell vehicles, given...
versus a bus which runs on electricity.
In terms of... No, please.
No,
please.
go ahead, please.
In terms of tailpipe emissions, I think it's as good as batteries. I think the whole equation here is that the longer the distance trucks have to go or transportation has to go, the economics of hydrogen start to work out better, because here the whole transmission, storage, etc.
So you still have that ratio we talked about, right? So if you're taking the same electron from the renewable energy, you're using 3 times more. So whatever the cost of electricity tomorrow is, even 1 rupee, it's going to cost, the cost for a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle will be 3 times more than a battery operated electric vehicle, whatever that works out on that front.
But you might get a longer range.
Right. So you make it longer range. And now with battery swapping, you can address that range piece of it in a much better way. So where I think there could be an opportunity is in some locomotive applications where you've electrified a certain piece and you haven't done a large piece. Maybe it could be a transitional area that would make sense because long distance. Markets like US where you would actually do 1,000 miles a day, and you want to run it, and you run 2 shifts on it, right? With autonomous trucks coming in, you want to run maybe 18 hours a day, right? There you're refueling maybe a thing, so it could play a role, right? But markets like India, where you're probably doing 500 kilometers a day or 600, You're probably stopping every 3 hours for a break from a driver fatigue point of view, or 4 hours. That could fit within swapping, fast charging others. So it won't make sense. And India is or most markets globally are very economically, the commercial market is very economically oriented, right?
Every market is.
Right. So unless it makes economic sense, it doesn't. It could make sense to replace diesel, but pure electrics could still be cheaper. So it would still be if diesel is costing you X, this could be maybe 10% less, and the other one could be 40% less. So from that point of view, it could still be an area of zero emission and make sense.
I think hydrogen was sort of born as a concept for vehicles in a time when vehicles just couldn't do large range. Like batteries, itna bada battery laga hi nahi sakta hai. So if you can't do 500 kilometers in a truck, what's your option? Like hydrogen is your only option. You have a different proposition with green.
No,
that's genuine no emissions.
So the reason why the first NTPC buses started in Leh is a rarefied air and low temperature. So these are places where batteries struggle.
But these will remain niche segments, niche use cases. But as he said, in India now with batteries doing the range that they can, and fast charging and swapping, it's becoming a very limited use case where hydrogen is your only option. And if hydrogen is not your only option, then it's the most expensive option.
I think quite paradoxically, for some reason, it's hydrogen that's first looked at if you're talking about buses. Everybody's looking, Tata Motors.
I'm telling you, it's because coming from that same legacy. Like it's the same set of bureaucrats, same set of consultants still writing the reports who are still basically saying, well, batteries are $400 a kilowatt hour, they can't do more than 300 kilometers of range. It's coming from that era.
So if you look
like
at
a decade
the
behind.
Sort of market for clean buses, you would definitely see more tenders. Whatever be the mindset for FCEVs over batteries. When it comes to buses, and I'm not even sure about distance here, how big is Leh?
And Suruchi, another question. Young entrepreneur, 20-year-old going to college, is there an opportunity to work in your industry? And if so, what? Punit gave us two things. He said you can set up a solar plant, earn between 15 to 18, 19% interest. Or you can raise funding, lease vehicles, set up something like BluSmart. In your industry, what is the opportunity for an entrepreneur?
I think ours is more of an opportunity with roots in climate change as a problem. We're looking for kids who are driven by the need to change the way things are or to build a future for themselves. So they are willing to address very large problems which aren't... So you could work for IT services company and I'm sure you're solving a problem which is like large on scale, but this is an existential crisis. So all of that engineering skill set, which would otherwise have gone into MNCs, need to come into climate change and green jobs. So I would not say it's still a nascent industry. It isn't even really an industry. It's pretty much a cottage industry. I remember when it was just us and another company for a long time. Now you have mom and pop establishments all talking about electrolyzers. So from a business point of view, sure, if you could import electrolyzers into the country, you have two ministries. So there's Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Power, each with sort of different parts of the hydrogen equation that they're dealing with. So MNRE typically deals with what happens, how do you push consumption, what's known as SITE. So it's just green hydrogen consumption, which it's trying to push for. And Ministry of Power basically says, I will take anything, electrolyzers and more, as a source for green hydrogen, and I will give you whatever power you require to produce or to reach 5 million tons per day. So if somebody who is a 20-year-old said the opportunity here is for me to access these bids and subsidies by getting electrolyzers in, sure, there's a business there as well. I don't think there's even 10 to 20% that you can make that you would probably be able to make in solar because you'd have to spend a lot. But according to me, the opportunity is in trying to create massive disruption. And there's a lot of people working on making even water splitting more efficient. Seawater splitting, for example, I've heard so much about it. So you need vocational training more than an engineering degree right now. And if you could join the 20 companies that exist that help with this, you'd be doing your bit. So I'm not sure
Super.
it really answers your question, but
No, but very interesting, no?
really?
Should we go to Chetan next? Chetan, would you like to? So I've known Chetan a while. Each time I meet him at a party or somebody else's house, I keep bugging him and asking him questions. It's become like second nature. But today I get to bug you in isolation, like get you stuck in one location for many hours. So tell us a bit about your long, illustrious journey in EVs. By the way, I have to add this thing. I called Anand Mahindra for I was just trying to do research on this industry. Mm-hmm. And then I told him, you're coming. Mm. And he was like, Chetan is like the godfather of our industry. He started this off before EVs
Tesla.
were a thing in India.
Before Tesla, right?
When did you begin first?
So I got into electrics in 1990. And I know, maybe I don't know if you were born at that point. No, so I got into racing solar cars when I was at college.
Wow.
And we was part of the team at Michigan. We raced from Florida to Michigan, and we came first in the US. And GM sponsored us to race in Australia for the World Championship. So we're a bunch of 20-year-olds. We raised $1 million, put a solar car together, and we raised from Darwin.
You raised $20 million.
1 million. Yeah. We raised 20-year-olds, but we raced from Darwin to Adelaide, which is 3,200 kilometers in the World Championship. And we came third in the world. Honda came in second. And for me, that you could travel a continent on sun energy was like, wow, this is the future. Right? So that's what I want to do. So,
a fantastic name.
Sorry?
It had a fantastic name. I think it's called Sunrunner.
Sunrunner, yeah. And then a bunch of us said that when we graduate, let's start something in electric vehicles. So 5 of us used to meet and every 2 weeks and decide on what business plans would come out. The US. And then one of my friend's father, he was a PhD from Caltech. He invented the airbags and did a lot of seatbelt work and sold that company to TRW. He loved our idea. He was a mentor. And he says, come and work for me. So we all ended up working in California in 91 doing electric vehicles. I went to grad school after that at Stanford, and I did a lot of work on hybrid electric vehicles. I felt that electrics needed a host of electronics, software, mechanical, and that was a great program that kind of combined all of this stuff. And went back to this company, had already gone public by then, and started doing electric vehicles with them in California. And that's the time California was switching from, the aerospace industry was dying, and so they were switching it to EVs. So there was a big push from both Bush administration, later the Clinton administration, to get electrics on that front. And that's when I came back to work for him, I said, listen, I think the market, my mentor asked, told him the market, I think is going to be on in India and China and in developing countries. And the solutions we need for these are different. So he liked the idea, and the concept of Reva was born as what I would initially call an Asian electric vehicle for developing countries. Post that, as
when did Reva launch? Which year?
We launched in 2001.
Wow.
So it's 22 years ago. We developed in the late 90s, right? So it was a very different time then, right? Because you didn't have people, you didn't have investors, you didn't have the tech side of it.
Reva started in 2001.
Yeah, so...
why Reva the name?
My mother's name.
Revati.
No, Reva.
Reva.
Man,
Means a new beginning in Sanskrit.
I always thought Reva was like revolution or
Yeah.
Well,
revolution.
once you get the marketing guys, they said revolution, electric vehicle,
Yeah.
alternate, the EV joined together, which almost every company uses that same EV that we put 21 years ago. I look at them and go, I thought we trademarked that, but it seems like everyone's using it. Anyways, I was doing work in India and the US at that point. Half the tech was here, half the tech was there. So honestly, I'm a technologist. I wasn't an entrepreneur, right? Just to me, I was passionate about my tech side. But then I said, okay, to build a business, I had to become an entrepreneur. I had a friend teach me how to put spreadsheets to create a business plan, right? And try to go and start to raise capital. And got some seed capital from our family business. ICICI.
What was your family business?
Automotive components, aerospace, electric material handling. So if you look at the golf carts in most of the airports are from us. So we've been doing all of that for a while. But this was quite different from that point of view. And so I got some seed capital there. I got ICICI and Technology Development Board, which is hard because, you're 29 and you ask someone that you want to get money for electric vehicles in India. And the first thing they ask, where does this work in the world? And to give a 29-year-old, that was, I must say, it was very good for those financial institutions to give you debt at that time because VC money in that was just non-existent at that point. Built that out, and then in 2001 we launched. 1 month after we launched, the government pulled the plug on subsidies. And actually 1 month before we launched, and doubled the taxation on electric vehicles.
Why was
and
that?
reduced taxes on petrol vehicles.
Why?
Well, look at who were the players at that time in the country. And it was just, it didn't feel, people didn't want electrics to work, right? And
Seriously,
yeah.
I always thought that was just bureaucracy not getting it.
No.
They were already anti-electric at that point?
Well, think about it. 1 month before all of this done, all of that disappeared. Subsidies that were there, you built the business on the fact that this was given and confirmed.
So who got the subsidy? If you guys weren't live in the market, who really got the
Nobody
subsidy?
got it. They just killed the whole subsidy.
Without giving it to anybody?
They were giving anyone. And they also increased taxes.
This 2000?
2001. Right? So
Global financial crisis.
it was a big issue. And so I think the only way to survive was actually looking at global markets. So we actually went to 24 countries. UK was my largest market. So in 2005, 2006, Tesla had raised money from Draper. Others did. So, Draper Fisher invested in us, amongst others. So there was a bit of clean tech capital coming out in 2005, 2006. The first signs of clean tech, right? If you remember that, the VC industry was changing a bit. So we got some VC money. And then in 2010, was at the Frankfurt Motor Show, we were showcasing our new products, the only Indian company. And everyone was talking billion-dollar investments, right? Tesla had already got $1 billion. Nissan was talking 1.5, GM was talking 2 billion. And I said, this needs a different level of investments. It was still hard to come by in India. And I found ourselves very good in tech. So I licensed our entire technology to General Motors. So we showcased this electric spark platform in 2010 at the auto show. But 3 months later, GM got bought by SAIC in China. And so, they changed their strategy. And that's the time I spoke with Anand. And initially, what started as a technology licensing went to, getting a majority of the company in 2010. And to me, the vision was more important. Can we build electric mobility at scale? And, ran that till 2015. Built up a bunch of products, around 7 products for Mahindra on their platform. Got them into also racing. So you see the Mahindra racing, I started that business too. And then, stepped down to kind of rethink, because it was a long time. And that's when idea of Sun Mobility came up to start looking at kind of the questions we've been talking about, right? Range anxiety, cost, refueling time. So I said, if you could actually solve these problems, there's going to be a huge opportunity, right? And the second part was, where is the opportunity? Is it going to be at the OEM level? I felt that the business system of the future are going to be in energy, right? Can you democratize energy in a way that's quite different? And then where do you focus on that front, right? And 2 and 3 wheelers were 80% almost of India. So can you give one solution for all of that? So, right. And the second was buses and trucks, which is 2% of India, but 50% of the emissions and energy. Right? So in a way, it was departure from personal cars to saying where's the biggest impact in society, where's the largest business in energy. And in those businesses, as an energy player, the economics made sense. So if you gave a customer something that was 20% cheaper to buy and 20% cheaper to operate, right? Then there's a fundamental shift in them adopting. And then there's a fundamental shift in sustainability, right? Eventually it came from that. And so Sun Mobility started trying to look at the fact that we can make it cheaper. That was the hypothesis. I spent a year going around the world, which is a great time to take a time off, and understood why swapping worked and why it didn't work, right? And trying to see the tech that needed to it. I spent 3 months understanding what to do in Bangalore for the buses, for BMTC, and try to see what solutions would work. And did fast charging, did slow charging, did swapping, and realized that the economics in swapping would work much better. And to rickshaws in Delhi. So it was a real insight, and then the tech was very critical. So spent a year, filed my first patents, and then started a company with my partner, Uday Khemka, who's a very passionate on climate change. So what brought us together was that he was into renewables, I'm into mobility. Sun Mobility is where I started racing solar cars. It's also his family side of it. So everything came together with the name, and what we wanted to do is how do we run the world with this. So Sun Mobility started with that ethos of really addressing these aspects there.
Can you tell us a bit more about that? What are you guys doing at Sun Mobility?
So what we do is that we've taken 2 parts. Let's start with the micro mobility. And if you sell a vehicle sans the battery, without the battery, the cost of the vehicle can be cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicle, right? So we heard that the cost of batteries are 30%. In some form factors, it could be 50%. In buses and trucks, it could be even 60%, right? So depending on where you are, between 30 to 60%. So it would be the cost of the battery. So if you remove the battery management system, even the charging system, then the cost of any IC vehicle, any electric vehicle can be cheaper than an ICE vehicle, any form factor today. And if you look at the amortized cost of energy, battery, and the cost of energy is cheaper than fuel. And then if you think of I can swap it in a minute, then you've addressed both the range anxiety and the refueling time. So the concept is to create battery as a service, right? But then create it across a common solution across all platforms. So we took 2-wheelers use 1 battery, smaller rickshaws use 2, larger loaders use 3, and something like a Tata Ace would use 4 batteries. So anything from a scooter to up to 2 tons, which is 80% of India, could use 1 battery and 1 infrastructure solutioning, right? And work across this format. So that was the idea around it, micromobility. And then we have solutions for trucks and buses that go from 5 tons to 55 tons. And we use modular batteries that can allow you to have 1 or 2 batteries to get you different range formats, right? Again, you can today have a truck or a bus that's cheaper than a regular electric truck or bus, cheaper, and you can address range anxiety. So if you think of in a city, you're doing your routes, right? In a city like Bangalore, 92% of your routes are under 40 kilometers, right? But you do average 200 kilometers a day. So actually, why do you carry a 3-ton battery when you can carry a 600 kilogram battery? So it's 2.5 tons lighter, right? And which means your energy efficiency is 10 to 15% better. And you can use a much smaller battery, and the battery is the most expensive thing. So you cut down the cost of the battery and to a third or so, and you cut down the cost of the station because of the high utilization. And so the economics work out much better. These are also very long life batteries. So in scooters and trucks, scooters, they last probably around 3,000 plus cycles.
So you're making the battery, or?
Yes. So
And also, what is battery swapping when my battery is out of charge? Do they come to your
yes.
service point?
No. So today we have We have around 600 touch points. In Delhi, we have a little over 400. We have a station at every 2 kilometers, right? By the next couple of months, we'll have more touch points than all petrol stations put together. So it's really accessible. Within 2 kilometers, you can go to any network, right? IOCL is our partner. So we are at Indian Oil petrol stations here and there, so it's easy to access. But they're at metro stations, they're independent sites, they're at franchisee partners.
So can someone like BluSmart use this tech?
Yes, they can, but that's for cars. We haven't done it. I think in cars, for services like what they're using of shared mobility and taxis, swapping makes a lot of sense.
And eighth.
Definitely good. But we've today started the business in the 2 and 3 wheelers around shared mobility because these people are driving a lot. So it makes a lot of sense because our earnings are higher. Personal mobility, people drive less. So the models have to change slightly, but there's no technology issue. For example, if you look at a country like Taiwan, in 92% of all electric 2-wheelers are with swappable solutions, right? Just by one company, but it gives a solution to multiple companies. So the solution is working at scale. This year, 50% of all electric trucks in China were with swappable batteries, right? That target was supposed to be achieved in 27. So you're seeing now at scale this happening from small form factors to large form factors. So you have 2 models. You have battery as a service and mobility as a service. Battery as a service, we've partnered with over 15 OEMs. So you can walk into an OEM showroom. Say in this case, you want to buy a 3-wheeler, you walk into say a Piaggio showroom. You buy the vehicle, right, without the battery. And like you buy a smartphone without your SIM card, right? And then you sign up on our platform. The dealer himself sets you up. You have an RFID card, you have a wallet. You go to any station, you can then just swap your batteries, and you only charge for the energy you use. So you use half the battery, you get charged only for half the energy that you use. We have both pay-as-you-go models and subscription models, right? And these work out cheaper than even CNG as a fuel, right? And the cost of the 3-wheeler today, when you walk into a showroom, is cheaper than a CNG vehicle. So, and we do this without subsidies, right?
Are there subsidies for this?
If you buy it and as a mobility as service, which I'll come to, but as battery as service,
I saw in that 10,000 crore subsidy, 1,000 is for charging.
Yeah, so there's supposed to be this, right? But again, policy lacunas come one, and this is another big policy gap the government has, right, on this front. The second is mobility as service, where we found a lot of fleets want to go electric, and they don't want to deal with the infra. They just want to go. And when they cross 50 vehicles, they found it very challenging to run their fleets. So we give them the vehicle, the energy, data, and the whole service associated with it on a cost per month basis, right? So today we maybe have, only on mobility as service, we have a little over 15,000 vehicles with fleet providers who in turn are using them to deliver to Amazons and Flipkarts and everyone else, right? We also have infrastructure at Amazon sites.
And who's the biggest client in terms of?
They would be partners for Amazon, so they'd be like a Zip or Zingo and a bunch of all these. So we're on 55 fleet customers today. They may have fleets from 50 to maybe 3,000 vehicles of our vehicles on their platform, right? And they can go to market very quickly, right? We in some months can put 1,500 vehicles on a fleet in a month, which is very difficult for them to go on, right? And now their routes change. They have no issue on range anxiety, right? Swapping anytime they want, and it's all inclusive, right? So that's both battery as service and mobility as service business here, and then in trucks and buses on that front.
Is that a viable solution for you guys to collaborate with?
Swapping? Very few things we would ever disagree on. We haven't been able to agree on swapping yet. We've been chatting for a few years.
Why?
Funnily, we were actually originally big believers of swapping. The first patent we filed at Ather was a swappable battery pack. So, and a lot of the first early hires at Ather were all hired to build swapping stations and swappable battery packs. What we figured eventually is, for a lot of practical reasons, our customers weren't willing to swap a battery. What was happening is, and it's like, we can talk about cost, we can talk about tech, product, all that later.
Isn't the battery inside? How do you open it up to swap?
So especially building a more premium vehicle, what you kind of realize is, and I remember having this conversation back at home with my family, because the idea initially was very like very powerful. It totally is. It's very hard to not fall in love with it. In fact, I think I raised my Series A funding by saying it's swappable battery pack.
We'll get you there. You're going to all turn around. But let me hear you out first.
I'm acknowledging that I have believed in it for a long time. The early designs were actually all with swappable battery pack. We thought of robotic stations and everything. What happened is I had this chat at home, and everybody liked it until they asked me, how will the swapping happen? And I said, you will take the battery out and you will put it on station and put another one out and put it in. Oh, yeah, makes sense. And how heavy is the battery? And then we ran into issues. So I said, obviously, we'll break the battery into two parts.
How heavy is the battery?
20 kgs. So we'll break the battery into two parts, right? So you'll only have to lift like 10 kgs at a time, max, maybe 8 also. And I realized nobody was very excited about it. And very quickly it was like, "Arey haan, theek hai. Papa swap kar lenge. I can't. Mother can't. But dad has a back issue. So maybe sister swap kar legi, but wo Ahmedabad mein nahi hai abhi. So Tarun, tu jayega tab tu swap kar lega." And I very quickly realized the only way to actually solve this problem, because most Indian consumers were not willing to do a manual swap. See, the example that Chetan talked about, very powerful. Taiwan. The Taiwanese customer is willing to do a manual swap. They're willing to lift up that 8-9 kg ka battery, 1/2, 8 kgs, pull it up, slide it in a rack, pull another 8 kg ka cylinder out, slide it in without breaking anything. Do this twice every couple of days. But I realized that the Indian customer, personal consumer, like absolutely, fleet consumers will do it in a heartbeat. Like it's a no-brainer. Personal users were not super excited about doing it. And the only way to run the entire solution for them was to have an attendant at the station who would do the manual swap for them. But the minute you introduce an attendant cost as a company in this entire infrastructure, everything just stops making sense. That's what happened to us. Then we ran into a second issue, again, not cost related. So we ran this very small experiment. Like I would do a lot of these, like these mock protos, right? Like have the consumer just walk through the experience and see at what point do their eyes break contact, like, when do they switch off? And I was walking through this experience, and I realized the person was, I just bought this scooter, brand new scooter, on Sunday. Monday I go to a swap station and I'm going to change my battery. When do I get my battery back? I'm like, never. Right? Like your battery is a commodity. Like just think of it as petrol, right? We'll give you a battery. It's fully charged. Full range. Not full range because, listen, obviously life will deplete. You will not always have a 100% battery. After 3 years, it'll be at 80%, but you will get 80-85% generally. Then that's not fair, no? I just bought a brand new scooter. You told me 100 km of range on Sunday. On Monday, you give me something at 85 kilometers of range, a 3-year-old battery. And I was just playing, उसमें जंग लगा हुआ है, उसमें डेंट है, like मेरे को नई बैटरी चाहिए, ठीक है, मैंने नया स्कूटर खरीदा है. I realized I can't solve this problem. Like it is possibly solvable, right? But I can't solve this. The Indian, like I have to fight so many other battles with the Indian consumer today about electric खरीदो, नए brand से खरीदो, premium खरीदो, connected खरीदो. उसमें if I add that you don't own the battery, your range will be plus minus 20%, and you will have to do a manual swap. I realized like I'm just guaranteeing this, our business will fail the way we are set up. So we pulled out of it, which is why we haven't agreed yet.
So counterpoint to that. So
Yes.
all valid stuff. So we started with shared mobility, where
Where the problem is lesser.
where
We will manage
there's
better.
not an issue at all, right? And when you start with personal mobility, and you're selling your first 100 scooters, you can't put infra all around a city because the guy's going to say, where do I have it? But once infra is in place, 500 stations in Delhi, right? We have 100 in Bangalore. There's 85 LPG stations in Bangalore. We have 100 which cater to 200,000. We have 100 stations here. Suddenly you're saying, hey, I see the one outside my office. I see one outside my work. I see outside my kids' school. Now I'm thinking differently. So for us, it's a journey. You start with shared mobility. Because there you're putting 500 vehicles somewhere, and you put the infrastructure up. once you have enough infrastructure, then there's an opportunity to look at personal mobility. There's several other things that we have learned also around the way, right? One is that we're doing 1 million swaps a month. So there is enough consumer experience. I probably agree with him that for personal mobility, you need slightly lighter batteries. You have, different segments of the population, and shared mobility is more willing to do it. But that's okay. It's not a technology issue. It's just what you would adapt to for that application. Right? So that's not an issue at all. Right? The second thing is that if you walked into a showroom, right, and the customer, you had a scooter that was 1.5 lakhs or so, it'd probably be 75 to 80K if you remove the battery, a 4 kilowatt hour battery, if there was that, and a charger and everything else, right? Now, you could tell the person, do you want to buy something at 75, 80K or a 1.5, right? But the performance is identical, the speed is identical, the acceleration is identical, the connectivity is identical. You can't even tell the difference between those two scooters, right? What would you buy? Now, let the consumer make that decision, right? So what we found with a lot of OEMs is they have a petrol, they have a diesel, they have a CNG, they have an LPG, they have an electric, it's swappable, and they have electric and fixed. And in some markets, 70% of the sales are electric with swappable, right? Which means consumers are walking into a showroom, have options, and decide, right? Now, 80% of India doesn't have infra at home, right? Today, when you start in the premium market, you're capturing the 10%, then the 15%, then the 20%. But once you go, if I ask, our staff in here, and when you go where he parks, my mate, she said, I bought a new scooter, but I park 200 meters away from where I have to go, and I don't have infra, so I've not bought electric, right? So as you start to go to scale, infra becomes an issue, right? And that's when the swapping really adds it, because it's 1 minute to do it, right? So it solves that problem for you. The third reason in my 15, 20 years is everyone was concerned what happens to battery life. I bought the scooter, I bought a vehicle, it's giving me a 3-year warranty, maybe an extended warranty of 5. I have to pay a lot more against it. But if it goes bad, I have a huge expense towards it, right? And unfortunately, because of the taxation and everything else in India, a battery replacement cost could be 30% more than an OEM cost structure, right? So that really adds a huge cost, right? So this battery could be 80,000 plus for a replacement battery. When someone hears that, they say, oh, are you telling me I have to spend that much money in that period of time? So that's another deterrent why they do that.
But
on the other side,
can I ask you a question? Like, if you have the inventory of batteries that you're swapping now, and let's say the life cycle of a battery is 8 years, 10 years, whatever the number might be.
It's much less for us. The reason is
actually I was going to.
The reason is we swap.
Much more now.
We swap a lot more, right?
Right.
So our batteries are swapping, say, twice a day.
Right.
So our batteries are 3,000 cycles. They last us 5 years, but we're using it a lot more every day, right? So it's a long life battery.
So what do you do with the inventory as a business?
No, we have around 1.2. So for every battery in the field, you have around 20% in our stations.
And beyond 3 years, will everything be running at X% of the efficiency today?
Yeah. So our customer promise is that it's 80%. You'd always get that much, right? But there's another interesting insight, right? We 6 months ago introduced a battery that's 45% more capacity. Okay, our customers are just loving it because they, over the last 2 years, had range, and now they have 40% more range, 45% more range. They're paying on the same amount per kilowatt hour. So for energy, they're paying the same, but they have performance.
How do you monetize this? Who is paying for it? So you're doing B2B.
Yeah, so as
Essentially.
B2B and B2C, in B2C, you're going in, you're using a certain amount of energy, you pay per kilowatt hour of energy you've used, right? If you're B2B, I've included
So you're
that.
not paying per swap?
You're paying per swap, but
Or are you paying per kilometer driven?
you're paying per energy use. So think about it, kilometer driven, I'm giving you 1 liter of petrol, you may drive at 15 kilometers per liter, someone may drive at 10, someone may drive at 20. So I can't give you on a kilometer per liter. I can give you as a unit of energy. So like rupees per kilometer, rupees per liter, I'm giving you rupees per kilowatt hour consumed. We're digital and it's to the 3rd digit because it's all electronic. So exactly how much they've used comes on their screen, comes on their app, comes on their SMS when they get their invoice, and that's how much they've used, and they only charge for that much. So that's this part of it. But what's very interesting is we've had customers who've done 1.5 lakh of kilometers on their three-wheelers. And their friend bought one with a fixed battery. And after 3 years, they had to spend ₹1 lakh in replacement, right? And their battery capacity started at 100 and in 3 years dropped to around 65%. Because in fleet usage, you use a lot more than probably personal. In this case, this customer after 3 years has got a battery that's 40% better, right? Now in 2 years, a year from today, it's going to get another 10%. So in the 10-year life cycle of their vehicle, their vehicle has gotten better every year, right? Whereas you're buying something, a depreciating asset that goes bad. So when you start to think of all of this, right? But it's not a silver bullet. Every solution is going to coexist, right? Slow charging, fast charging, swapping are all going to coexist, right? It depends on the customer and their choice of what they'd like to do. They have infrastructure at home, they don't mind paying more, they don't like to go somewhere else, they like to charge at home. That would make sense. So each one depending on the customer's requirement. But finally, the cost structures are far more beneficial, right? And also the benefit of never having to worry the battery. When someone picks up a scooter or any vehicle, my big insight has been that they buy the vehicle. When they buy the vehicle, they always think of 1% of their usage, not 99%. 99% of the time, they're doing less than 40 kilometers a day. But that 1% of the time, they've got the extra trip for school with their spouse, an extra call, and they may have done 100. And when they do 100, right, they're looking at least having 120 kilometers. And then they derate whatever the OEM says, unless it's Ather, where you actually it's the other way around, where Ather gives you a very good, they're very transparent, which is very good. They're building that up, right? But that's an exception to the norm in the industry here today, right? So now suddenly, if you want that much range, you probably need a 4 kilowatt hour pack for a scooter, right? And even at $120 a battery pack, that's $480, $500 with charger and everything. It may be, it's more than 50% of the bill of materials. So wherever it goes, it's going to be a very large chunk on this front. And then the other challenge in scooters and three-wheelers in India is that you can't cool them. Very difficult. You can't have air conditioning.
Is it the batteries that heat
up? You can't air condition. Well, the battery life, at 45 degrees, the battery life could be maybe a third or half of.
And these batteries, are they imported or are they made in India?
So today,
the cells are imported.
Yeah,
the batteries.
So today, most companies would import the cell and make the packs. Ather does that. We do that, right? I think in the next 24 months, cells will start being produced in India, right? And maybe in 48 months, we'll have a reasonable chunk, but still a lot on the cell side, like what you talked about, the panels and the cells,
wafer
right?
cell panel.
And wafer panels, but that value is pretty high for a two-wheeler,
right?
Because the packs are smaller. So that added value could be 40% or so to 30 to 40%.
No, it's lesser now, much lesser.
Right.
It's approaching what cars were at Model S.
Actually, I should have framed that question to you and not to you, because
so
you're more seen. He's more B2B, right?
Yes, so swapping in our case won't work. I'll tell you my thought. Cars are premium products. People who buy cars, they're not the ones going to pull out a 40 kilowatt hour battery or 60 kilowatt hour battery of the car, right? They want ease, they want comfort. That's not a two-wheeler. Nobody, whether a fleet operator like BluSmart or individual person, wants the discomfort of swapping a battery. Because you bought a car for a reason, right?
And your cars don't have utility for 24 hours.
Yeah,
They're not plying at night.
I'm just setting the context coming there. So as more and more global OEMs I speak to in the US or in Europe or in India, they all of this thought process that, and like even Tarun mentioned, that nobody wants to probably replace a new battery with an old one. They were not so attracted towards building a car with swapping, where you take the battery out and change. The good news for us is that the range of the car is going up, right? And the range of the battery is going up. You don't need today, for intracity purposes, you don't need batteries which are more than like 80 kilowatt hour or 60 kilowatt hour storage. That will give you nearly 500, 700 kilometers. We have companies which are today, or large brands which are promising 700 kilometers or 600 kilometers on a single charge. But the consumption doesn't happen from personal mobility. even if you look at fleet operators like BluSmart, for intra-city purposes within the city, even if NCR you see, I mean, you can't exhaust more than 300 kilometers. So swapping doesn't make sense for us. I mean, that's what our thought is globally. I'm just telling our thought process of other fleet operators that we speak to. Revel in the US, who's also using Tesla Model Y cars for running a fleet like BluSmart. They are equivalent to BluSmart in the US. Best part about it is now the cost. So if I were to now go back to unit economics and say, look, apple to apple, if I bought a Swift Desire for 7-8 lakh rupees, I mean, now the new Swift Desire apparently cost went up from 6.5 lakhs to 8 lakh rupees. Today, you can't get a Swift Desire below 8 lakh rupees, a good loaded one with BS6 norms. A Tata car, I will have to shell out 4 lakh rupees more, 3.5 lakh rupees more on the capex. So you are saying that, look, my capex is high here. It comes with a battery. My capex is low here. It doesn't have a battery here right now. But look at the utilization. If I were to use 1 lakh kilometers and pay on an average between CNG and petrol and diesel, a mix of about 6 rupees per kilometer, I'm shelling out 6 lakh rupees on fuel for running the car for a lakh kilometers, which is the consumption is about 14 months or about 15 months. The same consumption on electric, I will have to pay a footer bill of 80,000 to 1 lakh rupees. So the additional amount I paid for the car, I got back in 14 months, just in the fuel cost. So the additional amount I paid for buying that electric vehicle with that additional battery, I recovered that in just 14 months because my operating cost was low. So I'm happy to pay for that battery upfront and utilize that over 14 months, and then I'm on par in 14 months' time. And then I can continue to run my car, charge my car at ease as per utilization. But swapping for four-wheelers, for cars, I think...
But can I ask a question? Without battery swapping, if you want to transport something from Bangalore to Goa, which is 1,000 kilometers, how do you do it?
I mean, you need to have charges in between
and stop, for example.
And how long will it take to charge a truck?
A truck will likely have 500 kilometers of range. You will stop once for about 3 hours. You will do not a full fast charge. You will do basically a hybrid fast charge.
Typically, when these trucks charge, they're using 3 hours to charge the battery. And what you're doing is, by swapping over 16 hours, you're using an energy over 16 hours, where each truck would use it over 3 hours. So in a way, you think about it, the grid power that you need, peak power, is almost 3x more. And we found this when we did a pilot in Ahmedabad with 18 buses with fixed charging and swapping. The buses with fixed charging would charge over 4 hours at night, and they would swap the charges after 4 hours for the other buses. And the same buses were taken care of with one station. And we needed around a megawatt of power, and they needed 2.5 megawatts of power. As you go to this scale, a megawatt of transformer will cost you 1 crore rupees. So you have to think holistically. Then you need parking for all of these buses. So, I mean, when you have a huge space today to scale, and you have 5,000 vehicles, tomorrow 50,000 vehicles, you have to park 50,000 vehicles. What is the real estate cost of 50,000 vehicles versus you come in, you swap in? Each of our stations for the two-wheelers today do 200 swaps a day. So you have 600 stations. So on a daily basis, I can cater to 120,000 scooters. Right? That's the kind of throughput we have. So the scale you're able to do to add 1 million vehicles in a country and 5 million vehicles, your infrastructure, the energy cost, the real estate cost, the solutioning around, the whole thing has to come together.
Also, it kills a bit of range anxiety, doesn't it?
We find that tremendously. We find that at least, that when someone knows that 2 kilometers away there's something, they use more of the battery, They also gun it.
And he said eventually the differentiation is going to be brand, like it is for ICs.
Every business, ever.
It's not range, it's not this, it's not that.
सब commoditize हो जाएगा.
So,
सारा spec commoditize
so what?
I just have a quick question. Are you saying tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, everywhere in India, the same rules apply? Range anxiety,
actually, we haven't
charging,
seen a difference. So I'll give you usage data.
Right.
We now sell across 100 cities, so it's reasonable tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 distribution. Our users are across all 3 towns, equal numbers. I think tier 1 daily usage is 31 kilometers, tier 2 is like 32, tier 3 is like 29. There is no meaningful difference of usage, daily usage. There is no meaningful difference of buying patterns. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3.
That's surprising. You're saying people
It
in
is
tier 3 are
mind-blowingly-
buying
it is very confusing.
the same percentage as tier 1?
It is very confusing.
Why is that?
Everybody's buying in the same proportion of the premium and the entry level.
Why
variant.
is that?
I think because everybody's generally misjudged our economy. India has always been supply constrained, not demand constrained. Like in two-wheelers also, my biggest belief has been since we started Ather, that everybody's misjudging the market by trying to build a cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper two-wheeler for a long time. I bought my friend bought a Honda Activa when I was in 10th standard, when it just came about. First Activas came about in the country. It was, I think, about 45,000 rupees back then. That's 2005. To 2015, when we had started Ather, or actually, heck, forget, 2020, 15 years later, the damn product was still only 75,000. It didn't grow with inflation at all. Purchasing
Now
power
it
would
is
have grown like
90.
4 times. अब वो 90,000. ठीक है. अब वो थोड़ा काफी इफेक्ट आया उस पे कोविड का. But the consumer has moved like a lot of steps ahead in life. That same customer, when he goes to the market, he's like, if I'm buying a bike, I'll spend 1.6 lakhs. If I'm buying a scooter, he's only spending 90K. Why? It's not like पैसा खत्म हो गया scooter खरीदते ही. 90K के ऊपर कोई बंदा scooter नहीं बना रहा. ठीक है. I'd always believed this. We kind of hedged our bet launching multiple variants, but every damn time we've been surprised.
Before I finish with Chetan, for our crowd, for an entrepreneur young starting off, what is the opportunity in battery, like battery swapping? What can somebody build?
So, the market is very large, right? And there's also an existing market of e-rickshaws. There's around 2 million e-rickshaws, which in battery swapping and energy business is around $1 billion a year, right? They're all in smaller cities. And so you've had a lot of smaller startups creating solutions for retrofit kits for these e-rickshaws, because they use lead acid batteries, and after 9 months, these batteries die and they have to replace it, which costs around 35,000 to 40,000 rupees. So you could, at that point, get into a subscription model, and they're able to then also use it in, they do it during the day, they'll give it to their nephew or someone in the evening for 3 hours, so they can use it instead of charge. And lead acids take 5-6 hours to charge, unlike lithium ions, right? Because they don't have that. So clearly and there are opportunity. And because it's going to be different, India is such a big market, it's going to be difficult to be in every market in every place. There are going to be opportunities for micro entrepreneurs to look at such options.
So you would
in this
suggest
area.
set up charging stations or battery swapping
This
stations?
is so they can be there in the business of battery swapping, right? In the battery side of it, I think there's also, we're doing franchisees. So so there could be a franchisee who takes a station and they get a certain
How would
return.
that work financially? How much money would I need to put up to be a franchisee? What is it called, your battery
we have-
swapping company?
The Sun Mobility, right?
So-
So if you're looking at a smaller station, that'll be around, that'll be launched in a couple of months. It'll be $1.5 lakh as a franchisee fee.
And CapEx?
That would be a franchise. So that's what you'd give as a deposit, and then you get a certain revenue share. And then, tomorrow.
Don't you have to spend to set it up, the store or
The smaller one,
space?
they can set it up. We just send you on wheels, and it gets all online, right? The larger stations need a little bit more. The investment is around 5 lakhs for that area. Again,
This is not including real estate and all of that.
no. So someone already has a shop next to that. They put this, and then they have extra business, right? And then they also have secondary businesses. He may be a tire shop, and he does this. Or he may be having other goods to sell. So not only has a revenue from this, but he also creates that. So all our dealers have that, right? So if you think about OEMs dealers have this. If you think about it, 5 years from today, they're not going to have revenue on service as much, because the service of electric vehicles is much less. There are no oil changes and all this stuff. How will they make revenue on an ongoing basis? So by giving them a franchisee model, they are able to make revenue. Not only that, typically a station may see 50 customers a day. So those 50 customers that are coming, you can cross-sell them. You can say, hey, your vehicle needs a service.
And how much do you mark up the electricity, your cost to the recharging thing? As a franchisee?
I don't think it's to think of it as a markup. What you're doing is you're taking a battery and you're amortizing it, right? And then you're adding the charging infrastructure and amortizing it, and then the energy and amortizing it. But let's take a scooter. a petrol scooter would probably cost you around 2 rupees, 2 rupees 20 paisa per kilometer, right? A soft scooter may cost you between 1 rupee to 1 rupee 20 paisa a kilometer, right? And the cost of scooter would be cheaper than a petrol scooter. I'm just giving you an idea of what that would mean on this front here.
So if I were to put up 1 lakh rupee and set up Sun Mobility battery swapping next to my store,
Probably get between an 18 to 22% return minimum.
even today,
Even today, yes.
at the frequency of people
Yes.
using battery swapping
Yeah,
today.
yeah, right. And that could be higher in the years to come as you start to look at it.
So lastly, Tarun. So Tarun is a bro and we hang out. We recently
I've been
spent...
dragged into the hanging out. Yeah.
So I know his personal life a bit more than others. Also, I have researched Tarun's company, Ather, a fair amount. Maybe Tarun can start telling us a bit about himself from the beginning for everyone else listening.
I'm a Marwadi. Can't speak though. But born, brought up in Ahmedabad, but can't speak Gujju either. One of those guys who had to go to science because marks are gaye, so science to lenge. And did science. Somebody suggested you should write JEE. So went for coaching, cleared JEE luckily. Got a seat in IIT Madras, so went there, did a 5-year course there. Graduated in 2012, and we started Ather a year later in 2013. Our love, I was trying to say even in the start at some point, was actually, our love actually was the energy industry from like a very long time. Me and my co-founder Swapnil have been calling ourselves Ather Energy since many, many years. So we really always wanted to start an energy company, which is why we called ourselves Ather Energy and not Ather Motors, thanks. And to this date, we keep hoping that this becomes an energy company before we die.
Explain how, energy company?
It's not. It's not technically an energy company
How
in any
become?
ways. How, I don't know. Itna nahi socha hai. But life is in some ways very short, in some ways long enough. So I kind of think 10 to 20 years to build the two-wheeler business and then another 20, 30 years to build the other stuff.
Do you think at some point with scale, it would make sense for you guys, if you own the charging infrastructure, to also generate your own electricity, maybe using solar?
So actually that's the plan. The energy cycle is basically generation, distribution, storage, and then application. In college, we spent many years trying to work on generation. We tried to build engines, very, very high efficiency engines. We succeeded technically, not commercially though. So, and later on the idea that we had was to build battery packs, which is storage. And we wanted to build a swapping network, which is distribution. So we justified to ourselves by saying, yaar, energy generation pe kaam nahi kar rahe, but distribution and storage pe kaam kar rahe. This is Ather Energy, the distribution and storage company. And later we were building a scooter on the side to put that battery pack on, and we fell in love with the scooter. So we became a vehicle company. But I kind of still think, like, we do run a fairly large fast charging network. Actually, in two-wheelers, it's the largest fast charging network in the country.
How is that? Because your competition has incumbent distribution through service centers, right? Like if you take...
Yeah, but they don't have charging there, no?
But I would assume it's easy for a TVS or a Bajaj or a Hero to add a charging infra to existing distribution.
So the problem is not technology. The problem is what business are you in? And it's just how the lens that you apply. If you believe that you are a vehicle company, as defined by the definition of we put together a vehicle and we sell the vehicle, then getting into the business of charging, unless forced to, seems kind of odd. It's like, अरे गाड़ी बनाते तो चलो पेट्रोल भी बेच लेते साथ में, कितना ही मुश्किल है. Our customers, captive customers. But you don't, right? Because you kind of understand that that's not our business. So, इतना समझ में आता है companies को. So they don't get into charging unless they will really be forced to. We just think differently. We actually see this, like as Punit was saying, thought synergistically. Listen, like गाड़ी बनाएंगे, बैटरी भी खुद की बनाएंगे, charging भी खुद ही करेंगे. अगर enough charging station लगाएंगे, and if you fast charge there, then we'll need storage there that will supply the power to fast charge these batteries eventually. You set up like 20 stations ka charging, that becomes like a microgrid. Then you got decentralized power generation, distribution, storage. Sapne bahut hai. So it's...
You know, classical economic theory, like Adam Smith or the Austrian theory of economics, Take the example of a needle. When somebody tries to make a needle from start to scratch, is likely less efficient than somebody who's mining the metal required for the needle, somebody else having another expertise. So why are both of you in particular, when it comes to your particular companies, trying to do everything from start to finish?
No, not everything. There is a business.
I'll answer myself, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there is a business. So it will be pretty weird if I said we should build our own tires. You're not in the business of building tires, right? So if I said my business is building vehicles, then thinking charging, thinking batteries is kind of not sensible unless you're forced to. But if I think I'm in the business of selling you energy, as it really is, then the lens changes, and then a few things start making sense.
But if you're not in the business of selling energy today, why are you thinking on these lines?
So that's a dream. I think some of the things most of the stuff that we do today, including setting up charging stations, is really in the service of the vehicle that we have to sell. Right?
Are these brand agnostic? Can anybody go to your charging station?
Our charging stations, a lot of people can now go because our charging standard has become the national standard.
So if I have a Ola scooter, I can go to Ather.
Because Ola hasn't adopted a standard yet, right? But Hero Vida has, Matter has, actually a bunch of e-two-wheeler companies and startups and charging point operators have.
Also because Hero is your investor as well.
Hero's an investor, right? So that gives us an advantage there, right? But it also brings the largest two-wheeler guy on the standard platform. So the company starts thinking this way. Hey, how can we get more people to adopt a standard? You won't think like that if you're a two-wheeler company. If I think like a two-wheeler company. But if I think like, hey, I'm ultimately, like 50 years out, I'm in the business of getting you low-cost energy, then I'm thinking a little differently long-term. My decisions are a little different.
So market shares today is, say, 30 Ola, 20 TVS, 15 Ather.
12.
12 Ather?
Yeah.
7, 8 Bajaj?
Bajaj is also at 12, 13 now.
So Bajaj has picked up of
Yeah,
late.
they've got enough distribution today, right? So they can turn on the distribution. Sab jagah ki dukaan open kar sakta hai.
So with distribution, these guys are able to achieve scale faster than a Ola or Ather might be.
Short term, absolutely.
But why not long term?
Long-term distribution is not really a moat in India. Is not really because that was the 80s ka India when MSME was a difficult thing. So if you could get enough entrepreneurs to sell your vehicle, you have actually a moat. But today, MSME interest in setting up e-two-wheeler distribution is crazy. Like we have, I think this is 6 months ago, we had I think 20 or 30,000 dealer applications for a business case that requires you to put 2 crores upfront. Now there are a lot of people who can do this. There are like 10,000 companies who run automotive dealerships in India, all scared to hell कि भाई electric सीखना है. Otherwise we have no future, right? So what are the best e-two-wheeler companies or electric car companies? उनका distribution ले लो. You are already coming with an investment mindset. I want to invest and learn this for the next 5 years. So you can scale up. So for example, we will go from we've gone from like 0 to 200 touch points in like 2.5 years. We'll go from 200 touch points to 1,000 touch points in the next 2.5 years. At which point you've crossed oil and fuel ka scale already. What took them possibly 30 years. So distribution is a very weak moat now in India. So it's a low-hanging advantage for incumbents because they can turn on the tap faster, maybe a year ahead of us, but it's that much. After that, it's a lot of other things.
I think I keep coming back. See, here I have like a personal interest, right? Especially in your space, more so than yours, because it's more competitive in the public domain. What is happening to Ather? What is happening to Ola? Because there are two very similar companies trying to build a similar product. What do you think Ather is doing well, where Ola isn't? And what do you think Ola is doing well, where Ather isn't?
What Ola is doing well and what we are not is getting the message out.
Marketing?
Their marketing is damn good compared to us. They've been able to ensure that a lot of people have heard about them and the fact that they have a two-wheeler. Every brand track, every marketing research that we do, the biggest problem that we discover is that people don't even know what is Ather. Like up north, the biggest feedback that I get is that most people think that if they have heard of Ather, ये कोई European, Norwegian company होगी. पता नहीं इंडिया में कब तक रहेगी.
What does Ather mean?
It's a Greek word.
Meaning?
It's a cleanest form of air. So ether energy was meant to be cleanest form of energy.
What is the difference between a cell and a battery? And when we said batteries all of these times, and in the Indian context, what does it actually mean? Do you want to take that?
Sure. So we see battery as a battery pack, which is looking at cells. Then you integrate thermal management, the mechanical. You put all the sensors, the electronics, and then you're closing it up and making it a pack, right? There's a lot of hardware and software and other stuff that goes that's customized for the application it's designed for.
And the temperature as well.
And the temperature. And then the thermal management is very important. The new regulation coming in, there are a lot of new safety regulations that have come in that are quite stringent, that require a lot of innovative designs to manage thermal on the side for safety as well as to enhance your life on this front.
Is anybody making cells in India? Are we able to compete with China?
Making cells is a commodity. It's not a technology business. It's setting up any commodity manufacturing today. The challenge of setting up cell manufacturing in India for a while now has been demand in here. And the minimum investment required is pretty high. Like if you're not bringing 4,000-5,000 crores to the table, practically, it'll be very difficult for your plant to have the size and your purchasing to have the size to really make any sense. Forget competing with the LGs and Samsungs of the world. But the other problem has been demand. Like even if you set up a 5,000 crore plant, the production out of it has to be sold to somebody. That's only happened now.
Is Ola attempting?
Ola is attempting building the cells.
Why is that?
The logic there is that vertical integration will help reduce cost further.
But will that take their cost below Chinese import?
I'll give you one data point. Most cell manufacturing companies, the really enormous ones, right, like LG Chem, Panasonic, all these guys, even in the best times that they made cells and sold cells at like crazy ability to sell price at any point. Koi bhi price pe bech sakte hai wo log, right? Like last year basically. Their PATs have generally not crossed into double digits. They've been generally like 4-5%, 6% PAT businesses. And they're very high technology businesses. So I've generally considered cell manufacturing as this really complexly bad combo. Very high tech with commodity margins. So it only makes strategic sense. It generally doesn't make cost sense.
I'm trying to understand as a layman
Correct.
the chemistry of a cell. But maybe we start from the very simple fact of cell, battery, what is it? What is involved? I don't know who wants to take it.
Right.
See,
Very simple layman. Like think I am an idiot, but look at me and explain it to me, not to you guys.
then you should take a stab at it. You'll explain better than most of us on the table. Any of us on the table.
So a cell has an anode, right, and a cathode, right, and like a separator that separates the two so they don't short. And then you put an electrolyte in it, and then you put that into a container, and then put the electrolyte in it, and that's what forms. Think of your typical AA cell or anything that you have, right? And cylindrical cells are very common. They're still a larger size, something closer to probably something between a C-size battery, approximately that. It's called a 26 size diameter and a 750 in length. So this would be probably a standard way of how you look at a cell, right? And
it's literally filled with, it's called a jelly roll. It's literally filled with jelly. That's the electrolyte layer.
So lithium and cobalt does not come in at the cell level. It comes in when you're packaging.
No. It's at the cell, right? So your cathode it has an NMC, which is nickel, manganese, cobalt. It could be NCA, right, on this front, which is what say some companies do, and then you have LFP, which is lithium manganese phosphate. So there are different chemistries, and even
when I hear lithium-ion battery, what does it mean?
So it could be all of them. So lithium-ion would be anything that is a lithium battery.
So what is the role of lithium in a cell?
It is one of the materials that's used. I mean, if you think of a cell to create a potential difference, right? You try and get two materials, and if you remember the periodic table, at an end where you can get a big difference. Lithium happens to be in an area where the potential difference between that and the energy it can keep is very high compared to, say, lead. So lead, aluminium air, lead acid batteries, right? Your standard batteries, they all have different nickel zinc. Each one has it. So you're taking two materials that have a differential in the periodic table, and you're using that to look at it, right? So that's the more you store more energy in a battery if it can like lithium, because the difference in the periodic table is much
I know
higher.
nothing about science, but when you say differential, what do you mean?
Well, think of it that if you had water and you try to put water from 1 feet or 3 feet, right? So think of it from 3 feet, you'd get a lot more versus from 1 foot, right? So that would be the potential difference you could have.
In
That would be the equivalent of saying, I have two materials, right? And if the potential is higher, right? then
when you're
the-
saying potential, my mind is not able to picture potential of what.
So the potential would be, in this case, let's simplify, would be voltage, right? So if I have a bigger difference between 2 points, the voltage would be bigger, and that's equivalent for me, pouring water from a foot or 3 feet, right? So if I'm pouring it from 3 feet,
Are you
has a
talking about the material's ability to pass voltage through it?
No, that's resistance.
So when you're saying potential of storing electrons, or
No,
what?
it is the potential is basically the difference between the cathode and the anode, right? So if you got a bigger difference, electrical difference between them, then you can generate, with all things being equal, a higher amount of current. Okay. So current, think of that as the speed of the water, right? That's it. So the higher up you go in the building, the faster the water will drop, right? When it comes to the ground. If you drop it from, as he said, like stable height.
So you're saying
it'll
if the battery is bigger,
No, it's not the length. It is the electrical difference. It is basically the periodic table mein what he's talking about. Usme the difference comes in. So lead will generate lesser potential and lithium will, I think, generate higher potential.
If you take the standard cell that you get for your remote control, it has a 1.5 volts.
That's zinc, right?
Right. So zinc carbon or whatever, right? Then you look at lead acid, right? It will be around 2 volts. Then you look at lithium iron phosphate, it'll be around 3.2 volts. And you look at lithium ion or NMC chemistry, it'll be around 3.6 volts. So now if you think that I can have 3 times or 2.5 times the potential voltage, which means the amount of energy I can get is much more, because energy is current times the voltage. So if I have 2 times more voltage or 2.5 times more voltage, then I can give you a lot more energy.
so is this where lithium and cobalt is used?
Cobalt is, basically you dope these things. The voltage difference is not because of cobalt. You can have cobalt or low cobalt chemistries and the voltage will be very similar. Cobalt determines the energy content and I think the resistance is different because of the cobalt that you use.
What are the ions actually going across the anode
Wait,
and the
the
cathode?
resistance
Is it
basically
actually
changes.
the lithium? Is it lithium ions which are moving?
Yeah.
So so surprisingly, I somehow feel like I should know this, but I don't. So does
You're the one who's the PhD in.
and yet so is lithium like a consumable?
Well,
So what happens at the end of a
when you
battery's
charge it
life?
back, it goes back, right? So at this point, so over time,
the
you get
lithium is not consumed. A cell loses life because its resistance keeps increasing.
So
Right.
So what happens
So
is
its ability to
the medium
door
through
is
which
getting
the medium through which
smaller.
electrons are traveling, no?
Right.
That just keeps getting, for lack of a better word, just worse and worse. Just more the resistance is
so
increasing.
over time, there's deterioration.
Electrons don't flow well.
There's deterioration with what's called lithium plating.
Right.
So also if the voltage goes very low, that the lithium is actually deposited. And that prevents electrons from going through, right? Because
Right.
now it's become a layer. So
Right.
that's how one of the ways the cells would deteriorate
Right.
is that they actually, it starts over time, a little bit of it from the aqueous solution in
Right.
the electrolyte will actually start to get deposited, right? And that starts to over time deteriorate.
Why is it called lithium ion battery?
Because the lithium ions are sort of
Lithium
flowing
ions-
So
between-
they
Lithium's
are
good.
still the
Yeah,
ones
but they're not
which are
getting
moving.
consumed, right? Like this thing inside the cell.
So, because you're able to reverse the
Yeah.
charges.
Correct.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so we understood broadly what a cell is. Now, when people say, like I was talking to that Log9, a bunch of battery companies, which I realized later are not making cells, predominantly packaging cells into making them batteries. How does one battery company compare to another? Why is one better, another worse? What goes into the process of packaging cells into a battery?
You mean in battery manufacturing?
Battery, would you call
Battery
it
pack
manufacturing?
pack
manufacturing. Pack
The right
manufacturing.
description
Or
would be pack
packing.
manufacturing.
Right?
No, packing can mean something else. Packing could happen with a built battery pack also, technically. So
Right.
battery pack assembly is the
Assembly.
right description for
Yeah.
it. You can have a ridiculously high amount of difference between companies building battery packs using the same cells.
Who all are doing it in India and what are they doing differently?
Mostly it's OEMs doing for their own internal purposes.
Explain OEMs.
OEMs are basically vehicle manufacturing companies, right?
Original equipment manufacturers.
Yeah. So all of us build our own battery packs typically. Like all the key OEMs in India now build their own battery
Assemble.
packs. We build our battery packs. We don't build batteries, we build our battery packs. And we definitely don't build cells today. Obviously, there are companies like Chetan's who are building battery packs because it's a slightly different business. But the differences come from three possible layers, and I think it did talk about it. One is basically the thermal management. Thermal management is actually, in my opinion, possibly the biggest single differentiation between all quality companies. There is actually a level below that. Just the quality of assembly. उसमें ही बहुत बेकार काम हो सकता है. You can just assemble, you can just weld the cells wrongly.
Is that only because we are more tropical in nature than
Nah,
China?
nah, nah, nah,
What is thermal management? Is it because
Sorry,
we're hotter?
Before we get to thermal management, let me just describe how actually painfully complex battery pack manufacturing is, assembly is. In a typical, forget the cars are too many, like even in a scooter, right? In our typical scooter, you will have about, let's say 200 cells. You will have roughly about 800 welds. 800 welds that will happen for these 200 cells, 2 welds on each sides. If any of those welds is wrong, that will mean that cell, that particular cell, will lose life very quickly. Like literally, it could lose life within a few weeks, right? Maybe sometimes months, but usually within a few weeks, the pack can go off. So you've got to get all your 800 welds correctly. Okay. Getting 800 welds correctly for most companies implies a higher level of manufacturing excellence than the famous Six Sigma. Six Sigma is 3 failures per million. Yahan pe if you do 3 failures per million welds, that means I think 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000 battery packs are guaranteed to fail, which is a pretty crazy number for a pack manufacturing, for like a OEM, because the risk of a pack failing in the field is just crazy high. So it is a damn hard job just to get the welding right.
How much of your resources are going into building battery packs out of cells?
Between battery team, battery, BMS, and manufacturing engineering, my guess is that's somewhere in the range of 60 to 100 people, about 100 people possibly.
And who
Less
all
than
are,
100.
who all are doing it well in India? Battery pack assembly, building.
I think most OEMs, like let's say us, TVS, Bajaj, Ola, Tata.
Is that the big differentiation that everybody's fighting over?
So
now?
I think all famous auto companies that you know of right now, they're all building reasonable okay packs. But between us also, you will see significant battery life differences that are not going to be understood yet. So for example, our oldest battery packs are now 5 years in the field. And they are still at 90% plus health. Which means we are now internally starting to project 8 to 10 year ka battery life. We know in the industry that I think most of our competitors will also get to 4-5 year battery life, but 8 to 10 is going to be very difficult for most OEMs. It's a difference that will emerge over a course of a decade. Consumer को समझने में कि अच्छा Ather का battery pack, like how Honda का engine became famous over a 10-20 year period. वो perfect rhythm, like no sound, amazing quality, but not visible in the first year or two, right? So, but it's a refined difference that will not be understood today. Most OEMs are building enough sensible battery packs कि आग नहीं लग जाएगी 3-4-5 साल तक ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए.
So range is dependent on how many cells are in the battery pack?
Yeah.
That determines range of the vehicle.
So, now coming to the thermal wala.
And does it also, like let's say, how much does the Ather scooter weigh?
About 102 to 106 kgs, I think.
And उसमें battery का weight क्या है?
About 18 to 20 kgs.
So if you add 50% more cells to your battery pack, your range
Just
will
add
go
10
up
kgs.
50%?
Yeah. Possibly even more for some efficiency reasons, minor.
So range is not really...
It's not technology.
It's cost.
Range is just cost.
Right?
Range
How
is a
much you-
product spec decision.
Yeah.
आपको कितना range चाहिए? Like, obviously, it gets missold as like, somebody's cracked this amazing battery that will do 1,000 kilometers in a car. So उसने 2 battery लगा दी है. मतलब कोई amazing technology नहीं crack करी है. Okay. So range is generally not a technology problem. Where technology comes in are basically जो thermal management ये बोल रहे थे. Why is thermal management में what is the difference? For example, right now we are the only player where we don't put any restriction on fast charging. So we tell our customers, if you want to fast charge practically every day, be my guest, right? Kar lo. Because
Otherwise, what is the problem with fast charging?
most companies, like for example, I have a Hyundai, they recommend, I think, 1 in 10 charges to be a fast charge, I think. And I think most companies recommend don't fast charge if it's a very hot day. Don't
Because it
fully
reduces the potential in the cells?
because your cells heat up. Every time you pass current through your battery pack, current flows through your cells and the cells heat up in the process. Okay. Now, when you turn on the vehicle and the current has to flow through the cells again to go to your motor, the cell again heats up. In both processes, it heats up. It's like, think of a pipe. If you're like just basically rubbing the pipe really fast or rubbing the table really fast, it'll heat up. That's exactly what's happening inside the cell.
And then how do you cool down the bike once it heats up?
That's thermal management. So you can do it multiple ways. Cars mein typically it's active, which means pankha lagaya hoga ya fir there will be a liquid which will pass through the battery pack and will
Oh, in
cool
bikes
the
you have
damage down.
liquid cooled, air cooled like that?
But none of us in India does liquid cooling for two-wheeler. Crazy cost structure ho jayega. Doesn't make sense today. So all of us do different kind of passive cooling, which means we'll route air, like vehicle jab move ho raha hai, so we'll route air through around the battery pack. We will put very interesting materials inside the battery pack that will
For
take the heat
example?
out. There are these materials called phase change materials. तो उनमें क्या होगा? Basically, if the cell heats, let's say 50 degrees Celsius, any temperature, any heat above 50 degrees, ये material खींच लेगा. And this material will basically become a jelly as it takes the heat out. So 50 to a fair degree of temperature, it'll just keep changing its, it literally its phase change हो जाएगा उसका. And then as it gets time to cool down, it'll again harden up. Right? So you got these materials, you got a lot of epoxy. We use a lot of aluminium everywhere, like bhar ke.
I might sound really stupid asking this, but I read somewhere कि when you stop at a traffic light,
हाँ.
that braking kinetic energy is also converted into electrical. Does it happen in a...
Yeah,
Yes,
mostly.
regenerative braking, yes.
How does that... That's very interesting. How does that work?
So
The motor just becomes a generator, right? So a motor, run the other way actually generates energy back. So as you press the brake pedal or you put it to neutral, you can get it back, right? In cars, driving, you get probably 18 to 20%.
that's very high.
Yeah.
That's very high.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you after millions of kilometers of data from the vehicles we had done. 18 to
bikes?
20%. Bikes,
definitely
most bikes.
Is that a factor of the mass? The more mass...
Well, it's also the way you've
more
set the regen up, but most bikes in India give you 6 to 10%.
Actually, I'll
we
talk
have-
about what we do.
And when we've optimized, we've gone up to 18%. So it again depends on the controller, the algorithm, how you integrate it. There's a lot of work that goes behind it, and we over 15 years of doing that, we've optimized a lot more on that front. It's an important piece of it, right? But then also, of course, you think about it, when you put a lot of energy, it's charging the battery back. So therefore, also the batteries heat up.
Right.
The challenge on scooters in cities like Delhi, when it's 45 ambient, even the air going around it is going to be 45, right? So the batteries is harder to cool down in a midday if you're trying to fast charge it or this, right? So that's one of the concerns. In the winter, it's okay. In climates like Bangalore, it may be okay. But that's where active cooling becomes more important. So if we take the battery and put it in a station, for example, the station's air conditioned. So the batteries come down to 25 degrees. So even if the ambient's 45, the battery comes down to 25.
So how does that affect, say, Ather in Delhi versus say, Ather in Bangalore? On ground?
Well, cells in generally at 45 to 25 degrees, you could have almost half the life. That means if batteries are at 40,
correct.
right? So it's very important that it is. So cells don't like hot, and they don't like hot and fully charged.
And what happens in a cell when it's hot?
So when it's hot, the chemicals start to disintegrate a little bit, right? So at a higher temperature, like most chemicals, where as you increase the temperature, the deterioration is higher, right? So a high charge rate and high temperature has a multiplying effect. Because when there's so much energy there, then there's a lot more corrosion happening internally, right?
So if I'm buying a 5-year-old electric scooter from Delhi versus Bangalore, I should pay half the price for the Delhi one versus
half
mine?
the price. so I'll tell you what while all of that is correct, and obviously cells degrade. Like they're literally these cracks that kind of, I forget the technical term, stereokites या कुछ नाम था उनका. Literally cracks that form that increase the resistance. More the resistance, harder it is for current to travel, and your energy drops. Now, but what is happening right now is, for the last 5-6 years, and cell manufacturers don't like to claim this because they don't like the liability that may potentially come with it. But most good cell manufacturers have actually pushed the life pretty high. But they don't want to basically claim it, right? Because they will be then held responsible. So what we are realizing is, even in a place like Delhi, at the end of 5 years, cells are still probably good at 85-87%. Battery packs, sorry, not cells, battery packs. In Bangalore, that number might be 90. Right? Now, the difference would be if you run the vehicle a lot, right? Like in a commercial, like ye log jo use kar rahe hain, I'm sure they will notice there will be a battery, well, active cooling might make a difference. But if
What is active cooling?
Basically pass the liquid, keep the
The thing which converts into
keep
a
the
gel.
temperature low. If you don't do that and you run, let's say if you run even our scooter, 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers every day, let's say 30,000 kilometers, 35,000 kilometers in a year, which is pretty crazy. No personal consumer ever will do it. You will notice that the scooter in Bangalore is lasting longer than the scooter in Delhi. Except that you will likely hit like basic uski life you will hit. Okay. Right now what's happening is, most 99% of our consumers, the batteries will literally expire. वो जो calendar aging होती है ना, they will just literally expire, then they will hit usage के कारण expiry. So in some sense, if you do enough of a good work with thermal management, whether you are in Bangalore, whether you are in Delhi, whether you fast charge every day or you fast charge once in a week, you ride with 3 people, you ride with a single person, you ride at 90, you ride at 30 very patiently, you charge sensibly, you never take it to 100% or you always take it to 100%. All of it is making a limited delta. सब similarly, सबका battery 8 साल चल जाएगा roughly, किसी का 7, किसी का 8. So it's not making enough of a difference now. It's
And what is the story? You often see like these viral, dramatic memes of lithium is in Chile and cobalt is in Congo and China controls both
What
the
memes
mines.
do you read, man?
ऐसे बहुत आते हैं. Don't you see them? So many memes about Congo and Chile and talk about how China controls all refining capacity and we'll be dependent on them forever.
I think something has been discovered in India also now.
In Kashmir, but they say there's no
Australia
refining
has
capacity,
it.
so even that has to go to China.
Deposits are there.
It won't take more
So
than
I
a few
mean,
years to
I mean,
set
just
that.
like you know, there's an area where, you know, lithium in a way is the next oil, right? So I think the government's also thinking, what are the strategic partnerships you create, like this created from an oil energy point of view, right? So there's already conversations with South American countries, Australia and stuff to say, okay, let's have these partnerships to do it. And that has to be done if certain raw materials are in scarcity, right? But also what will happen, Nikhil, in 10 years, right? Recycling will play a very large role in a market like India. Because these batteries, once they're off, you know, today your cell phone batteries and everything were very small and they were very different formats. But, you know, as one of these car batteries may be equivalent to 5,000 cell phone batteries. So any recycling is there. And today recycling costs are actually, earlier you used to pay to recycle, now you can make money out of it. If anything can make money in a market like India where you sell paper and recycle it.
Make money out of it, how?
Means when you recycle it, you can sell back
More than the cost of recycling.
Oh, damn.
Oh.
So let me give you the number for example, just the cost of material, just the material alone in a typical 4 kilowatt hour battery pack is about $240 today. Right? About $60 a kilowatt hour.
Just
That's just the
lithium?
raw material inside. Like literally the cost of material, not like the assembled, processed
Cost
stuff.
of recycling the material to get it back?
Possibly 1,000 to 2,000 rupees, $10, $15, $20.
Yeah.
So if you like one of the places where people should go after in India, guaranteed, is recycling. Granted, you will not get that entire $240 yourselves because enough people in the chain who will take that money away from you. But the delta is so large that even if you were to make like 2,000-3,000 rupees in a pack, it's huge. And the national policy is almost going in the direction of lithium once in the country should never exit the country. Right? एक बार अगर import कर लिया ना lithium इतना pain लेके forex देके, bloody make sure it never please make sure it never leaves the country accidentally.
Is that a viable business? I was going to come to this question. From all that you spoke about, you started this business in 2013-14 with a friend of yours with less capital. If I'm a young entrepreneur today wanting to start something here, where do you see the opportunity? Is it in cell recycling? Is it in trying to build? I'm going to come back to the bike itself. You said 20 kilos out of 104 is the battery. Then we'll go to the chassis and the other parts. But where do you see the opportunity?
So I think recycling of cells is a very big opportunity. I think they're captive requirements. Like for example, if you came to us today and you said, hey, I will run basically a contract shop for you. You give us all your reject battery packs. I will strip them down. I'll convert into raw materials, which you can sell to your cell supplier back, right? It essentially fixes my pricing, right? Abhi aajkal agar lithium ka price bada, so I have to pay more for a production for a month, right? If I have enough cells coming back, then I can just basically remove that fluctuation out.
So what do I need to start this business?
There is enough tech available. You today will probably need a JV immediately if you want to fast track. With some company in Europe or probably in China or Korea who will have recycling tech. Or you can spend a couple of years and just figure shit out.
But there are companies in India who...
and there are good companies in India also, sure.
Who are doing recycling and are setting up shop even outside India.
Yeah. So you set up recycling. I think it is such a stable business. Itna battery India mein banne wala hai. 250 million vehicles, going to go to 350 million vehicles. And annually out of that, 30 million is going to come back. And 10-15 years later, a very large chunk of that will be electric. You got almost a guaranteed business, right? Sure, you may not make it's not going to be like a 50% margin business, but you don't have to worry about demand at all. Right?
What if I want to start an electric scooter?
Then you will need something disruptive.
What do you think the next disruptive thing there is?
Give away my roadmap. So I think the market changed from the time we started. Right? When we started, the disruption was the spec. Us saying कि हमने जब start किया था, the best electric scooter in the market did 25, maybe 30-35 kilometers per hour, top speed. वो 800 watts, really, mixie का motor था.
Hey, this also you didn't answer. We said double the number of cells, double the amount of range.
Correct.
What determines the speed of the scooter?
Motor power. And the motor power is determined by the battery size in some cases. Okay. So bigger the battery, it can supply more current. And if you want more speed, you need a bigger motor. Rule of thumb, you want to go from, let's say, every 10% speed increase increases the motor power by roughly about 30%. Something like that, roughly. So, bada motor lagao, you will go faster.
So are these the main parts? There's a motor, there's a battery pack, there's a chassis, there's tires, whatever, like body, and then
there's
what
a
else?
charger. There is a motor controller, another piece of electronics.
Is that what determines how much current goes into the motor? Yeah.
Motor controller is quite important.
And that determines
actually
the top
a lot
speed.
of the IP today for companies sits inside the motor controller. Motor itself has limited IP these days.
Can you break that down a little bit? Explain how a motor controller works.
To run a motor, you need somebody to send signals and control the power that it gets. See, motor if you just
in my mind, I'm thinking IC vehicle. I'm thinking there is a spark plug.
I'll see if I can take that
expanding,
analogy.
pistons.
Yeah, but think of it very simply. You have a regulator for your fan in your house, right? For your fan, you kind of do 1 speed, 2 speed, 3 speed, 4 speed.
Yeah.
The motor controller does that in a very sophisticated manner.
In a very sophisticated
What
manner.
is the uniqueness in each? So what is the big unique, what is the differentiation between your motor controller and Ola's motor controller? I'm just taking you guys because you're the most popular.
So I haven't exactly studied the motor controller in detail, but I can give one feature example. Recently that both of us did at the very same time, but just about 10 months ago. Both of us implemented a feature called auto hold. Cars have auto hold, hill hold, right? So for example, if you are on a slope, like coming out of a mall ka parking lot, let's say, you will engage auto hold, which means you will never accidentally slide back. So if you put the throttle on, आप आगे जाएंगे, throttle छोड़ दिया तो पीछे तो नहीं जाओगे गलती से भी. Simple feature है. Two-wheelers don't have it. Okay. But electric में you can build it because you got a very sophisticated motor controller. So it can ensure your motor only turns forward, does not accidentally go into reverse even if there's force coming on it. And it's a lot of sophisticated control to ensure how to manage that load वगैरह and ensure you always move forward. Okay. But the way both of us implemented it, pretty substantial difference. Like fundamentally sounds the same feature. But the way we implemented and the way Ola implemented, I think Ola's same capability would last a much shorter time. So if you engage this hill hold feature on a steep slope, after a minute or so, the motor would be like, okay, now I can't support this. It'll start rolling back. The way we implemented it, you could just stay like that for 10 minutes. Right? So there's something very different about we did, about how we did the algorithms, about how we managed the heat coming out of the motor ka cooling, the motor mein heat jo raha tha. A lot of very different stuff. We also changed just the experience. Like you don't have to like tap this, press this button, do this. In fact, cars have it more complicated. We said, if you press the brakes and you release them, you're automatically in hill hold. आप पीछे नहीं जाओगे, आप आगे भी नहीं जाओगे, right?
I have to buy a scooter, okay? Both of you cost similar amounts. Maybe $10,000 here and there.
Actually, it's 10,000 only,
Yeah. So how do I pick, should I buy Ola or should I buy Ather? This is a very relevant question for everyone watching this show, which will be millions of people.
My pitch is you should buy us because you probably understand that what we've done. So, you asked a question at the start.
What have you done?
Before that, you asked a question at the start, and I'm doing my company injustice if I don't answer the second part of that question, which is you asked me what did Ola do well and but I didn't answer what is Ather doing well. I would say what we are doing well is we have better word of mouth. So we may not have marketed the product well, so not enough people may buy it today, but the ones who are buying it have a better word of mouth for us than many of our competitors.
Because?
Because of how the product is built, its overall quality, the overall experience that you get.
Why are large scooter companies like Ola getting that PLI benefit and Ather is not?
Because PLI was just written incorrectly. And after the mistake was made, everybody's still struggling who will correct it. Because correcting a government written document is just, who wants to bell that cat, right? Who wants to be the guy who changed the document? So everybody's super scared of touching it. Though almost everybody agrees unanimously that's a mistake. So the definition was either आपके पास 10 lakh crore का revenue है, which no EV company has ever made, which means only listed large auto players who actually have very little interest in actually doing electric could apply for PLI. Or the only other way you can apply for PLI is if you actually are not manufacturing electric vehicles. But if you are a company manufacturing electric vehicles, making actual investments, committed 100% only to doing electric, you can't apply for PLI.
So if I start a new scooter company today, I won't get the PLI.
No chance. And it's not even like there's a second window. And window opens up every year that you can apply for PLI. So it's a pretty weird mistake that's happened. And it needs to be corrected. But that's the thing. Somebody just needs to find the courage to acknowledge that this is a mistake and it needs correction. And it's not just us. We are probably the most prominent one in the e-two-wheeler industry. But as you said, if you were to start an e-two-wheeler company today, you're kind of screwed. You can't apply for PLI. Even if you say, I'll invest 2,000 crores into this, give me PLI, you still can't.
Okay, so let's go break down the cost of the scooter by weight, just to make it interesting. 104 kilos, 20 battery, chassis how much? Start from the biggest weight.
Chassis is the largest.
Chassis really are going by weight. Plastics go by weight. Tires go by weight, right? A lot of those core components which are there in any scooter will go by weight. And the differentiation is your motors, your controllers, your battery packs, your clusters, your telematics, right? Those are areas that, unfortunately, the weight equation is not necessarily there, right? It's about, just take your iPhone.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And I'm just saying, how many grams is that? And
why
does it cost there? I'm just saying, I'm just trying to get that piece as an example here.
I'm not asking for weight in the sense that he'll say 100 kilos and he'll be like, "Zyada bol raha hai."
No, but you get it.
So cost-wise, battery costs how much?
Batteries, I can't give the exact numbers, but in percentage, generally about 35% is a good estimate.
35% of 1,65,000. Close enough. Okay.
It's exact.
That's not my cost, right? My cost is different. I'm not putting a cost number.
Okay, next biggest component.
The next biggest component is, in our case, the motor plus controller.
Not the motor part we discussed earlier.
Motor and the electronic controller that goes
Together.
Yeah, together.
How much would this be?
You can take this as another maybe 10%.
Okay.
Yeah. Then you can take the chassis. Actually, chassis is the second component.
Okay.
Chassis is, I think, I would say about 15%.
Okay.
So the frame and uske sare adjoining components.
Okay.
Then you've got, in our case, a touchscreen dashboard. So that's another 10%.
The 70% then?
Then you've got the
Battery
charger.
Charger, external charger.
And a lot of peripherals idhar. Usse mila ke another 10%. Then you can add everything aesthetic. The lights, plastic, body panels, all that. Simplify कर रहा हूँ, इसके लिए आप 10% और ले लो. और कुछ बच गया होगा तो basic ancillaries कुछ होगा.
10% बचा है.
हाँ, तो basic stuff होगा. There's a lot of other electronics on the vehicle to run the stuff.
How much are you selling the scooter for now?
Between 1,25,000 actually. 1,25,000 to 1,65,000.
1,25,000 to 1,65,000.
Yeah.
The subsidy per scooter in FAME 2 used to be about 40,000 rupees a scooter? 60. Now it is 40?
22.
So your cost of bike from 125 to 165 is going to...
That's our selling price. My cost is different.
What is your cost? Ballpark बता दे.
Ballpark कैसे बता दो आपका सर?
ऐसे ही बता दे. Margins दिखेंगे ना, number पे anybody will find out, right? Chetan, what is it?
155. To that, you have to add the subsidy, right? Because the subsidy is coming to the customer, correct?
No, to them.
The 155 is the customer's total price,
Right.
which means
So
the 20,000 comes to us.
So in reality, the selling price is one whatever, this plus 20 in both the cases. That's
But
the actual.
you remove 5% GST and...
That's the
But
actual
this is
selling.
crazy. Like, if on a 1,65,000 scooter, you get 60,000 on top of what you sell for, right?
Used to.
Yeah. So if he was getting 2 lakh...
No, you have to
25
account for GST, so 2 lakh roughly.
So without GST, if he was getting paid 2,25,000 in May 23, now he's getting paid 1,65,000 when he sells the same scooter. Okay, I'm going to make an assumption that you're spending 1,75,000 on a scooter you're selling for 1,65,000.
ऐसा lose नहीं करते यार. Come on, मतलब.
Roundabout.
No, it's lesser.
Okay, let's say 1,55,000 then.
You take some number. Fine, you take 1,50,000.
Okay,
fine.
1,50,000. So how do you work in an ecosystem? Your cost for the same commodities have not gone down significantly, right? I saw cost of battery
Cells has come down a fair bit, but that's about maybe 10,000 rupees since the start of this year.
Commodities haven't that much.
इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता. 3-4,000 रुपए.
Cells have come down by what percentage?
25%.
But still, this is a significant hit to your margin, right?
Yeah.
So this is another question for anybody brave enough to take up the job of building a EV today. I have some friends who are trying it. There's Ultraviolet. There's some guy who's trying to build a car called Praveg. These are all Bangalore boys, like old friends of mine. How do they plan for action from the government? I know FAME 3 is coming. Is there a prediction you can make around FAME 3 to help someone new start?
No, actually you can't. And that's one of the reasons why it's super difficult right now in this environment to actually be a startup trying to break through the space. Because you just have no basis. आप कहाँ पे match करोगे? If you say कि I want to build a product that I want to price at 1,40,000, but that's where 22,000 rupee का subsidy. What if this goes down to 0? Suddenly you may discover आपके पास margin ही नहीं है. In which case your burn goes up massively, right? So your entry point to building an e-two-wheeler in the market today, your table stakes of just entering this business, in my opinion, is about 100 million. If you're bringing 100 million, you can enter the game and then you'll have to raise a lot more, right? The only way out of it, and that also requires a ton of money, is a phenomenal amount of cost reduction. which we've been doing, everybody in the industry is doing, but it's super expensive. I'll give you a sense. I have a 1,000-member R&D, and we do very, very heavy analytics on this.
You have 1,000-member R&D.
Yes, that's what I said is the world's largest R&D for two-wheelers, electric two-wheelers. Okay. And we do very heavy analytics on this.
And this is not a thing, right? EV two-wheelers are only big in India, right? In Southeast Asia, it's three-wheelers, four-wheelers. I remember reading taxis converted first in China.
Yeah, I think that the China market is a very different organization. It's highly commoditized. So,
super cottage industry.
Yeah. So, for example, there's companies that's making motors, and they specialize at very high volume. They make 2 million motors. So the pricing is very low, and they have Type A, Type B, Type C motor. So if you're a two-wheeler manufacturer, you just go and say, I want that motor. I want that controller. Very inexpensive, made in very high volume, right? It's also replacement market's easy. I have standard wheels, I have standard tires, right? So a lot of the battery packs are coming from, there's 1,500 battery pack manufacturers in China. So you can just almost commoditize it and look at it here. So when everything is commoditized, then you're just doing your frame and body. They're giving much simpler solutions. They're not doing high-end scooters, they're doing basic scooters. For that, the investments in those are not very high. So they're probably for, a few $1 million, you can start a two-wheeler company, right? And survive in that space, and it makes sense. But that's very different from, where India is or where the premium market
That could only have happened in China. See, because China, the government force created supply and demand for electric two-wheelers.
Correct.
So the way all these manufacturers came up is force created so many suppliers. Like motor manufacturers, I remember when I started Ather and I read this ADB ka report, there were 400 manufacturers building electric motors for electric scooters in China. And I don't know, kitni 100 e-two-wheeler manufacturing companies. It's a super fragmented market. But while the entry barrier is small, the reward is also small. Because no company makes enough margin to really build a large valuation or a large market cap. There's just not enough value captured by any real player. Everybody is essentially a glorified commodity manufacturer. India's gone down a very different path. India's gone down, I would say, the more the US path.
Nikhil, what Tarun was saying, at the top level on a policy, the government is very aligned. But there's this gap between the vision and the implementation. So one example, what we talked about is the PLI scheme. The same thing is coming for the ACC, right? It's only given to a few players, very big players, which means some of them will be very successful, but that doesn't build the entire industry up, right? How do you create a sort of level playing field on policy? So when you look at the GST, right? Electric vehicles at 5% GST, but a battery pack, right? Or batteries are at 18%, right? So it's also hard, for a lot of companies only making electric vehicles where they'll have an inverted duty structure because the input will over time be more than your output.
That happens to us, no?
Right. It's just
we log in tons of money every month.
But that will not be an issue for a company that also has an IC engine business because there your GST is 28%. So now if you're an EV specific company, you're at a disadvantage than a company that is EV and IC. If you take that again to swapping, because the battery's at 18%, and now you separate them out, suddenly the battery's at 18, but the vehicle's at 5. Now, when a customer goes to swap, this auto driver is paying 18% tax. Crazy. On going green.
Inefficiencies.
Right? So that should really be 5%. So there's a gap. If the government say we want EVs to be at 5, then the inverted duty structure should disappear and services related to that for charging and swapping should come at 5, right? Subsidies. Let's say today we have one of our OEMs, the Piaggio. In their showroom, there's a vehicle with a fixed battery and one with swappable. Both have identical vehicles. You can't tell the difference between them. You buy the one with fixed, the customer subsidy comes through. To buy the one with swappable, the subsidy doesn't come through. The customer doesn't get it. Like he's today passing the subsidy through. So these anomalies are really challenging where they've not created a clear technology agnostic plan. And that's why I think there's a big gap between, like he just said, and once this is in place, everyone's going round and round. There has to be a far more holistic thinking that how policies, with technologies, and be agnostic. Things change over time. You can't say some things like this. But if you create in fundamental ways of thinking, then all of them will flourish and come through. But today, it's highly disadvantageous for companies in this way. And that's not the right thing we should be doing. We should actually, like you said, promoting younger startups, know that whichever way you go, the customer still gets a subsidy the same way. All policies are similar, right? And give benefit, if anything, to startups. That's how US and everything has. I mean, if I look at the right time when Tesla was almost going off, right? They got $500 million from VC, backed by $500 million from the government, right? That $1 billion at that right time made Tesla what it was, right? That's what, I mean, if we're doing that to companies today and supporting it, a very different situation.
But cost saving per vehicle, I wanted to ask you as well.
Yeah.
How much does it cost you to ferry a passenger for 1 kilometer on your vehicle versus a IC car?
I can talk for the kilometer in our case is about $22, 18 to 20 bucks. Depends on what product you take. You take a point-to-point ride or rental, it's in the range of about 18 to 22 rupees. Now, our brand promise versus...
What is your cost?
See, our cost is lower, but our utilization has to go up to make
At current utilization.
I mean, look, if I were to say a car should make about, to be self-sufficient, to break even on all, should make about 3,200 rupees per day to cover all my costs. The car has to earn me 3,200 rupees a day. It includes driver cost, lease of the car that I'm paying on daily basis.
How much does a driver get paid on average?
About 800 rupees on the lower side, 1,000 rupees on the higher side.
Per day.
So driver takes that. The car EMI or the lease on daily basis, monthly divided by number of days, is about 800 rupees. Parking, charging, all the paraphernalia is about 580, 600 rupees. Then the miscellaneous is your toll and your other costs. That's about 400, 500 rupees. It all comes down to about 3,000, 3,250. When the cost has been reducing drastically, it was earlier 3,500, now it came down to about 3,000.
And also just out of, like, I have heard that in scooters, if, let's say a Honda Activa costs 90,000 rupees a scooter, their bikes cost 1.5 lakh.
No, not apples to apples. Apples to apples would be 120.
120. So what I've heard is, if somebody were to ride the scooter for 40 kilometers a day, they save 35,000 rupees a year in terms of cost of energy in ferrying that vehicle. Accurate?
Less.
25.
25,000?
25,000.
Is there a number like that for your cars?
So that's what I mentioned, that if you run 1 lakh kilometers at a rupee 25 paise, rupee 50 paise.
Lakh kilometers would be how much per day?
So, I mean, you would be driving 250 kilometers because
That's a lot,
at 200 kilometers, you're doing about 6,000 kilometers a month, 72,000 kilometers a year. So for driving, I'm just giving a ballpark number.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come down to 72,000 kilometers only.
No, this will also help me make up my mind if I should buy a Tata IC or electric.
No, you should definitely buy electric. I'll give you a layman number. If you run 3,000 kilometers a month on an MG, your bill will be 3,000 rupees. See, for simple math. So
And in IC?
It will be much more. I mean, your
10
cost will be
rupees
about 24,000
10 rupees per kilometer.
It depends. I mean, depends on what car you're using, Skoda
So 30,000 versus 3,000?
Actually, Nikhil, for you, it'll never make the ROI. See, unless you buy a low-cost electric car, if you buy the problem is the asset cost of an electric car is so high that the kilometer saving is only worth it if you buy a car in the 10 to 20 lakh range. If you buy like a 80 lakh, 40, even a 40 lakh electric car, you don't have an ROI unless you run it like 100 kilometers a day. Okay.
So what I see a lot of people now, they're shifting to electric because they're saving on the fuel cost.
Right.
They're not looking at the EMI of the car because that's anyways in EMI, they're paying over 7 years. That's a massive saving. So between a Skoda Rapid and an MG electric, the differential is 21,000 rupees. Your 6 rupees per unit kilowatt hour for the BST meter, say 50 kilowatt hour battery, it's about 300 rupees. The range of the car is 350, but I'm saying 300 rupees, 300 kilometers. 300 divided by 300, 1 rupee per kilometer.
You remember old school people used to sell cell phones like AT&T. You'd buy like a BlackBerry back in the day. Then AT&T started this thing that don't buy the cell phone, pay me a monthly fee every month.
Right.
Wouldn't that be a natural next step for you guys because you are saving the monthly cost? Why sell a scooter if you can say pay me 5,000 bucks a month and use it?
That's what we do in our mobility as a service, right? We give you a vehicle, energy, data, services, all integrated with maintenance and all. You run your business. So we give that full solution.
Wouldn't that make sense
We
to you?
failed when we attempted it.
You attempted it.
We attempted a variant of it.
Huh.
So I do believe in it, and I still do, and I'm hoping that we learn how to crack it. But back in 2020, so what happened for us is we were selling our vehicles at 1.2 lakhs back then. And there was this moment of reckoning, paise khatam ho raha hai startup mein, and losses too high for every vehicle that we sell. So I went back to basics, did the math, concluded that if we do everything right from our engineering, we'll bring the cost low down enough that, but even then we can't profitably sell this at 1.2. To make money selling this vehicle, we need to up the price. We need to make the price 1,60,000. So in one shot, we had to go from 1,20,000 to 1,60,000. So obviously, sabki fat rahi hai. Nobody's really got the to like really announce it very quickly. But I'm convinced karna hai.
But maybe that's an opportunity for an entrepreneur. Buy your bike, start a leasing business.
So while we did make it announce it 1,60,000, as a way of sort of softening the blow, we said, actually a version of battery swapping, we said you could take a battery on subscription, okay, from us, which basically means the battery is in the vehicle. It will never be removed, except that you don't own the battery. You just pay a monthly fee. So you can get the vehicle for only 90,000 rupees, okay, 99,000 rupees.
But why did you think 90,000? You should have been like free. Check their credit score, charge 5,000 bucks a month.
So let me tell you the problems that we ran into, right? And we said 1,500 rupees plan, 1,800 rupees plan, lot of complications we came up with. Enormous, massive community pushback, like bahut gaaliyan padi. Because the biggest feedback that we got was that vehicle is still such a passionate, emotional purchase for me. I need to own this. So I'm not going to pay you a lifetime fee for this. Okay, you tell me when does this EMI stop? I'm like, agar sir EMI banaunga, to EMI ho gaya na. Like I've been trying to make a subscription product and make a lot of money out of this. They're like, you tell us 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, when does the EMI stop? So ultimately, I need to own this battery.
This is a very emotional thing. It might work in another country.
So we couldn't convince them.
I think we would all agree that a transition to EV is happening, even Suruchi, right?
Absolutely.
No?
No doubt.
I didn't realize she was in agreement.
Unfortunately, even just on our way here, you see so many EV showrooms, right? And I'm just talking about cars here. The revolution is here.
I've never seen everything like this come together, right? You think energy prices have come down and crossed over. Look at government support. I mean, I'm going back in my side 20 years ago. We still have challenges. Tarun have spoke about it. But they have FAME, they have road tax exemptions, they have a lot of concessions. Governments are for it, right? If I look at battery pricing, the way it's come down, if I look at technology innovations, today the performance you get from these vehicles. If I look at consumers today are willing to look at electric. 10 years ago, they weren't. You at least have it in your area. So it's very rare that every piece of it has come together, right? I think that's where you have the macro conditions are absolutely perfect today for this industry.
EV adoption is imminent. I mean, you can't probably
So it's just about,
stop.
and that hasn't happened. I'm just seeing it in 20 years. You see the pulse and you look at everything. Not everything has to come together to really make it happen. I think that's where you are today.
No, I was trying to create discourse. So, personally, I'm looking to invest in EV and I've been researching a whole bunch of companies, not just in EV, but energy transition per se. Carbon tax. A big part of Tesla's revenue for many years has been coming from carbon credits. Not so much today, but at least in the very early years. Do you think such a thing will happen in India and that could be the inflection point for EVs?
There is a carbon tax in conversation, and they've put out a framework for estimating this tax based on which part of the value chain you're based out of. It's still complicated and we're still trying to get through it and understand what the outcome is.
I'm almost certain a carbon tax is headed our way in India.
Do you think the world will be taxed at the same rate? And do you think that would be fair?
The world or India?
The world.
I think what's
Because
gonna
carbon
happen
tax
is-
only works if everybody's...
I think what's going to happen is we are going to be forced into it because that example, That's going to happen to us multiple times. And I know that folks like Niti are already annoyed by it, that all the Goras are going to tax the heck out of us with carbon, right? वो होने वाला है.
They've grown on the back of carbon. Like,
Yeah. So now it's time to tax us. Yeah. So I know, I do believe, I can already see it at some extent that policymakers can see it coming, that we will be taxed first as a country. And so that's one factor. It'll eventually flow through. The other thing is, the only thing government really can do is like the EV transition, the green energy transition has to be financially supported in some way. It could be a tax incentive, it could be a subsidy, it could be a PLI, it could be whatever, right? Like, आप support कर रहे हो, and the scale has to be built to like a gigantic scale, right? At some point, like for example in electric, EVs are kind of taking on its own, like without any support also. A fantastic opportunity is to then tax the vehicles that anyways are sort of on a downtrend. Nobody's really like lobbying for them now. So I think a carbon tax will find its way into everything. Vehicles mein sabse pehle aayega.
My proposal, BluSmart's proposal officially, and I was on the CII mobility chairperson last year, chairman for mobility service. And my recommendation was, even to CII and to the Delhi government, was impose ultra low emission zone charge. Could be any price you come up with your consultant or some advisor. Charge each CNG, petrol, diesel car this amount. Collect that money, make a pool, use that for building public charging infra.
So Delhi
Besides
already,
what we both are doing, government also comes in, uses that pool to set up charging.
But it won't
so
happen
Delhi,
today.
Delhi already had started this almost 12, 13 years ago. They created the Ambient Air Quality Fund, which taxed a certain paisa for every liter of diesel and petrol. And that put it into this Ambient Air Quality Fund, which will only be used for EVs. The reason Delhi still has a subsidy corpus and is still able to give industry national is from its Ambient Air Quality Fund that was started over 12 years ago, right? So it already has this, which came in the time of Sheila Dikshit, right, at that time. And that's sustained it. That's why you have the best city incentives in any place in the country is in Delhi. And it's continuing. It's gone on for years because they just have the corpus that's built up.
I only hope when a carbon tax comes, it is not applied per person, but more
On usage. It should be applied on usage.
because we as Indians use significantly lesser energy even today than the West, right?
Yeah.
Okay, last question, guys. Tell me one suggestion you would make to a budding entrepreneur who's 20 years old. What should he do in the entirety of the conversation we had? One low-hanging fruit he should start a business around. I'll start with Punit.
I'm pretty convinced battery recycling is a massive,
Damn it, that was my suggestion.
massive opportunity. I would not say do charging because we are doing it. It's a low-hanging fruit. I mean, if the EV adoption is imminent, massive opportunity to build
charging,
infra.
yeah.
But because we are doing it, so I won't
you can
request somebody else to come and compete with us. So what we don't want to do is to do battery recycling. So wish you all the very best. You can do that. Big opportunity. Go chase your dreams.
Waste management, EV waste management?
Yeah, that also could be another related party.
It's in the same recycling wala space.
But
Suruchi?
I'm genuinely thinking about setting up EV charging
Swapping.
at our offices, but with the hopes that eventually the electrons we produce a lot of hydrogen when we're testing. We have like a demo plant. It produces 10 to 25 kilos. That's a sufficiently large quantity of electricity as long as we get a good enough fuel cell to convert that to electricity.
Maybe you should set up one charging facility in every industrial complex.
I feel like it makes a lot of sense because there is a lot of off gases that don't always get consumed, testing, downtime, etc., and that'd be just enough. There are cars in Jamshedpur that drive people around. You can't really walk. It's a huge plant. Seems like a wonderful opportunity.
Chetan?
So if I see the next 5 to 7 years, and I think of entrepreneurs, it's hard to get a lot of money initially, right? And what do you do therefore from that perspective that allows you to enter a business and grow it? I think the way energy and mobility is going to shape up, the intersection of that is going to be a data play and an AI play and a lot of analytics coming in. And this is going to be new for these new businesses, right? So I do believe there's a large opportunity where a lot of entrepreneurs in India who got that with these policy changes and these markets coming in, right? So these markets don't exist. And if they're going to get bigger, you're going to find a way to connect them. And there aren't solutions today. You're doing something, we're doing something, but there's going to be much bigger pieces of that solution. So I think that's a good opportunity, which is new, which is global, which is data, AI integrated, and probably allows people to look at a particular problem that's very specific to, say, BluSmart or us or someone else, and solve that and say, in the process of solving this, I'm giving a value, and I can get in quickly and make that happen.
I would say build a adapter. I'm not knowledgeable here, so I'm writing like Marvel comics while I'm saying this. Build a adapter for whatever electric vehicle you have, which makes it compatible with what he has, what you have, and then map out where all the charging facilities of India are, and figure out a way to communicate with them and find the closest
It's very
one.
expensive.
We'll make it cheaper.
So two ideas. One, I would say, if you look at Southeast Asia, two-wheeler penetration is very high. If you look at the rest of the world, overall automotive penetration is very high. So we are going to sell a lot of vehicles still, and I think personal mobility is not going away. Obviously, it's I think going to be pretty big, especially as Indians become richer. I think for a while we're going to be in that phase where everybody will have aspirations. You'll want to buy more. Build a new form factor. I think electric allows that opportunity that ICE did not allow you. ICE kind of bucketed, because of technology, only a few form factors for you, car or two-wheeler. I think electric allows you the opportunity to, for example, the entire explosion with micro-mobility, the ULU form factor, right? And those vehicles. I think there are many such opportunities. So if you want to start an OEM company today, don't just go and say, okay, I'll also build a scooter. Okay, it's already like now happening for enough years. That's not disruptive. Go change a new form, attempt a new form factor. I think a lot of opportunity. Second one is something we failed at, or didn't succeed, definitely didn't succeed at that point. But I think there's a big opportunity, and I agree with you guys that yes, there are, I think, a lot of customers who want a different form of ownership with great vehicles, which can be expensive. Crack that. Like you can just simplify and say, crack a subscription model but own the vehicle, not like a daily subscription, right? How do I give you the sense of ownership?
These fancy car companies have that, no? Mercedes, lease and buyback.
Yeah, but somehow they're not like really flying off, right? Like, so how do you make this work for a very large chunk of customers suddenly? I think there's a big opportunity there. And again, electric and especially connected vehicles, amazing enabling platform, right? Connected vehicle can be tracked at all points. You know the usage, you know where to send them for charging. So I think the ecosystem is really well set for this kind of a company to be built. So I think both opportunities are there. And surprisingly in both, at least the latter, a lot of people thought about it, but nobody's really cracked it. Every company who's talked about cracking subscription quietly became a financing company. Everybody. I think so the opportunity is still pretty much open. And so is the opportunity for a new form factor.
Okay, last part. At the end of every episode, we do something which is going to help young entrepreneurs or something charitable in nature or funding a company which would have otherwise not got funded. I ask each of you to give away a certain amount of money, whatever you want to commit to. And then we will find a project together. We will find that young, bright mind somewhere who could both use your mentorship, all of you, and also your money as a grant or as funding into his venture. So you guys can commit an amount and then we'll reconvene and we'll go through the list of entries and we'll select the final one. Yeah? Who'd like to start?
So if it's an investment opportunity, I think I can put 5 lakhs.
Okay. Chetan?
I would also look at it as investment opportunity. In fact, even given my time, if I find that idea is really good.
Yeah, I think time's more valuable.
Right? And, if the investment opportunity is good, I'd put 25 lakhs.
Okay. Suruchi?
How about like 1 lakh to 2 lakhs for sure?
Okay. And
Anywhere between, 10, 15, 25, depending on the opportunities. It should be really exciting.
Okay, let's say between 10 to 25. And I'll also do 25.
Yeah.
So we'll add it all up and we'll have a nice... Yeah. We'll find somebody really who deserves
it
that
has to
money.
be-
Somebody young and like brilliant.
Yeah, it has to be really...
There are a lot of good hardware attempts happening
Yeah. We'll pick
that
one of
don't
them.
get money and could deserve the money.
Done. Super. So thank you, each one of you, for taking how many of What, 6 hours?
It's me about 6 hours.
Today?
This is 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's close to.
Cut, yeah. Done.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.